Crystal Age is just a legend from before the world was born. Before you were born.
The reason that the 13 trilogy drops the ball so often is that they try to juggle too many balls at once, and I've never met anyone with more than 2 balls. So how can something with so much soul be so bad sometimes? Lightning Returns is really sad, but not always. It's almost as though it knew what kind of reception it would get and became temporarily sentient. It's sad, like it's saying, I think I'm done with life and I'm definitely dying slowly. But there's a part of me that maybe you can reach, that isn't quite fully dead yet. And if you can reach it, maybe you can help me feel alive again for just a little while. Alright, calm down. Every ending is just a new beginning, and the 13 trilogy carries with it the inescapable intentionality that makes me feel wildly disparate emotions from each end of the spectrum, to the kind of excitement that only being at the end of the world can bring. Because it's so beautifully and impossibly wonderful, but also a gigantic, chaotic mess that's been absolutely trashed by life and existence, and fuck how they disrespected my boy Sazh. I'm still not over that. I don't think I ever will be. Lightning Returns came out sometime after 500 AF, and this is a game kept together just about by things that are often peripheral and secondary, but today takes center stage in a way that kind of defies logic, actually. But this is the 13 trilogy, so that's not an aberration, it's just par for the course. This is why the music, for instance, feels like a protagonist with as much character and personality as Lightning herself, perhaps even more than Lightning sometimes. Did I beat you to that one, or did you say it first? It's in the world, too. Roaming the lands of a dying world in a video game might not inspire peace of mind in many people initially, but looking back at it, I just think there's something to be said for that kind of design, since it carries with it the comfort of knowing that there is at least one constant in this world, and in life, even if that constant is that everything ends eventually. Initially, the thought of the end scares the shit out of you, but the closer you get to it and the more intimate it becomes, you develop an understanding of it. The end carries with it a chaos, I guess, but also the promise of the end of that chaos. And I will give this game credit for managing to capture that feeling, even though it was probably 50% unintentional. But most of the best creative works also have an unintentionality to them as well. It's funny how difficult it is to formulate any semblance of a coherent thought on any game in this trilogy, let alone try to wrap up all 3 in a way that does them justice, because the invariable truth I always encounter is the perennial abscess of creativity that formed when the lack of direction sent this trilogy into a spiral and affected many of the best things about it. The characters, for instance, almost all got shafted hard, and despite all that, I'm still addicted to it, even when it's disappointing me and hurting itself. And so too did I ultimately learn to, or perhaps have to, accept the fact that every feeling of joy that I would gain when playing any of these games would ultimately lead me back to the beginning of the cycle, on which I would revert back to anger and disappointment at an equally annoyingly interminable element of the trilogy that coexists with the absolute best parts of it all. And therein lies the answer to the question that the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy was asking itself long before anyone else did. Why did it stumble so much when the potential was always there? And from a holistic avenue, we can arrive at an almost insultingly simple answer, the first line of this video, the one about juggling all of the balls all at once. It's vintage Square Enix, isn't it? And that is as much a compliment as it is the worst slur imaginable in gaming. Square Enix genetics, man. They are the axiomatic truth of gaming. You cannot escape your genes. And I still love it. And I hate it. So that's uncomplicated. So, a formula just for you to describe what it's like to love this 13 trilogy, constructed by me in the innermost vestiges of my OCD at midnight while I stared at the ceiling taking mental notes about this series. Play FF13 trilogy game and enjoy it. Realize it's deeply flawed and get angry, get to one of the really good parts and regain your hope, then remember one of the worst things about it, be one of the few people who appreciate what it did right and yet simultaneously feel upset that it squandered so much of its innate potential in the process. Realize that the more you learn to appreciate it, the more angry you get at the screw-ups. Congratulations, you are caught in the cosmic fucking hamster wheel of the 13 trilogy fandom, and repeat ad nauseum forever and ever and ever. I must now succinctly state that one needn't possess a great degree of cognitive dissonance in order to love this trilogy, even in light of the fact that each subsequent game following my precious Final Fantasy XIII was just a slightly more battered, atrophied and emaciated version of the glorious happy days of the base Claire Farron game. Reason being, there are a lot of positives. There are, to take from this game, and it was doing the FF15 thing before FF15 was even called FF15, in that it was simply making the best of a bad situation. And as I sit here thinking about how stupid I am for having Final Fantasy as one of my favourite franchises of all time, I'm struck by the fact that that's been present in literally every game I've covered in the series. Every single one. Modern FF games post Final Fantasy X are always inescapably an absolute mess for multiple reasons, but they're also unfathomably unique and powerful in what they do manage to accomplish. FF12 was such a mess that the word protagonist became a relative term. 13 was far too linear. 13.2 was 13's rebellious child. 15 went through 2 different directors. 16 was made by the MMO dude who apparently forgot that characters existed halfway through and replaced them with boring side quests. The 7 remake has about 1 million different directors, and so on and so forth, all throughout the chronology of modern Square Enix. So this game ain't an anomaly in that respect, nor an anomaly in the sense that there are many incredible elements to be found within its flawed foundations. They just have trouble standing because the ground gives out underneath them, because that's what a foundation is. It just gives out from time to time. And that we find ourselves at the end of this line and the end of the world as the 13 trilogy seeks to wrap up this potent mixture of some of the greatest things I've ever seen in the game series, kept in always very close company by the absolute worst. It's undoubtedly the most FF13 thing ever. It's the 13 trilogy way. It's the best, it's the worst. And so now we can add to that a design philosophy of let's destroy the world so we can't ever come back and get tempted to make a 4th one. Nice. I was in search of any discernible memory of the past 2 times I played this game, and I asked it if it had any Lightning Returns memories left in there, and I suppose I then asked what end of the spectrum any memories were likely to fall under, and what fell out was actually very interesting. Vibes, pure emo emotions, and a few things that pushed me to the precipice of my sanity and made my OCD go absolutely mental. Sounds like the game for me. Wrapping up such a spirited and ambitious trilogy of stories in the perfect way is always going to be a very difficult undertaking, and the emotional baggage that you need to juggle is likely to break free of your grasp. I suppose the inherent issue is that which takes many years in games to build takes about a second to shatter completely. That's where the risk is. What was once a simple game, a very simple game, is now so unfathomably complicated that wrapping it up in a neat little bow is an impossibility. And with that elite impossibility for this trilogy, even before the implementation of time travel in the second game, most attempts to simplify things only serve to complicate them further. That's a lesson for this series, isn't it? So within that innate little distortion, I find the honesty of this finale setting to be a really refreshingly pleasant little thing, and perhaps even an admission of the overly ambitious nature of the project that preceded it, and as a whole, a nice bookend as it pertains to the thematic constructs, as it borrows from and abandons in equal measure the very concepts from which it was born. But the embodiment of this could be the dying world of Nova Chrysalia, where the game takes place, which is one of the most nice to look at and artistic worlds that I've ever seen conceptualized in a game or any media or story ever. I romanticize dying worlds. I think there's something pretty about them. I think I've said this before. A unique, unseen vibrancy to the last glimmers of light from dying things, like an uneasy sense of peace or relief, the relief being fragmented into 4 distinct archetypes in this game that you can explore. Even shattered glass can reflect beautiful things, you just see the cracks too. And this world, I guess, embodies that spirit of life in the face of death, like nothing else, except perhaps FF15, though I think 13.3 does it better. And I'll say why as we go along, but 13.3, they really should have called it that. I suppose lightning was intrinsic to the marketing campaign. At least that's my theory. Put a pretty lady on the cover and put a name there too. Normies won't know that it's the 3rd installment of a game they might not play the other games for, and anyone annoyed about the Sarah and Noel thing might come back too. Or maybe it's just stupid. I shouldn't try to get into the heads of marketing people. It's dangerous to one's soul and spirit. I appreciate and understand that all things must end. And with that existential knowledge and the often nihilistic psychological follow-up, I find a sense of excitement within it that few other things can touch. So when Lightning Returns turns out to be an end-of-the-world party in which every possible emotion dances under the same spotlight and engulfs you within it, you feel the sands of time encroach upon the mechanisms of the game just as powerfully as they do this thematic abstraction of the story and the lore. Whether you like it or not, that is where we're going, and this is called the time mechanic, but it lends and borrows time in equal measure. What does that mean? Well, it speaks to an appreciation of all things living, especially when things look the darkest and the vague hope that something else might just be waiting around the corner when it's all said and done. And this game screams that all the time in me. In that vein, it leaps out of itself and into the 4th dimension, breaking that 4th wall in a way that can get a player invested enough in the game to imagine life without it. And that is a very special accomplishment. One chapter ends, another begins. Endings and beginnings are indistinct from one another, is what I'm saying. And that truth runs through the narrative of Lightning Returns like an undercurrent. Even when the thunder is absent, you have the lightning. Oh shit. It's metaphorical. Indistinct is a word we can use again with an ironic undertone, because while all three games in the Lightning trilogy are indistinct in many ways, comparable to three distant planets relative to any other game in said trilogy, they're also so far removed from one another that they're as distant as they are relative. Oh, distant relatives. I just can't enjoy this game without being annoyed. I felt that way with 13.2, but the feeling wasn't quite as abrasive or profound, and with 13.1, I guess, I barely felt it, compared to these two, at least. I said that cycle was destined to repeat itself in my head as I played through again, prodding the supposed higher functioning corners of my mind with realizations as I played, like annoying shit. And it's annoying because all I really want is vibes. I'm a vibes merchant. I prefer to share those vibes than to sell them, but I analyze too because I have a stupid brain. And all of these things just can't be avoided as much as I love the trilogy. So it's a brief meta commentary, I know, but analysis of the most wonderful gaming experiences I can recall naturally allows me to explore these vibes. But the other end of that cognitive fucking rainbow is that with that comes an inherent disorder of thoughts that occurs when you realize the analysis means examining the parts you didn't enjoy as much, just as intimately as the parts that made your nipple hairs stand to attention because it was so fucking good, because they were so real and raw and brilliant. Analogous then, for sure, is the creative process for a video essay about Lightning Returns to the problems the 13 trilogy wrote itself into. The trilogy now has one final game to dig its way out with nothing but a tiny little rock hammer. Even the characters annoy me as much as they make me feel all warm and fuzzy or whatever, on account of the realization that every character other than Lightning barely interacts with anyone but Lightning. So the character interactions and dynamics that made 13 work so well, and to a lesser degree 13.2, have been stripped from the experience. This could have been the game where I said, it's just straight up bad. And the only thing left to do was to play it and find out. That's the easier part. But 13.3 is what it is, and despite dodging the name, it cannot in any sense dodge the responsibility of bringing to an end one of the most divisive and controversial trilogies in gaming. So it's on us now to open our minds, and knowing also that the haphazard nature of the series is actually one of the main sources of pure, unfiltered charm that the series has always had an abundance of, because it's all part of the fun. Just video games, isn't it? But if the inherent subjectivity of any particular creative entity was the nuclear deterrent that some claim, then essays would be non-existent. They would just never be made. Games are subjective too, and among the many sources of charm that this game shares with the player, the soundtrack is chief among them, and we'll get into that too. It has a lot of things going for it, is what I'm trying to say. This isn't just me hating a game or just loving it. This is the most difficult one to analyse, personally. But finally, we do get to do this one thing. We get to challenge our fate once more in an FF game by literally fighting a god. So at least it's still that same shade of batshit insane that I like in my JRPGs. So let's find out if it really is all lightning and no thunder. It's finally time.
Welcome, valued customer.
CGI City, aka Yusnaan. We're on a mission to go get snow. That's right, Lightning's got herself a third redesign. No, a second redesign and a third design. That's it. Nice shades. Any opening CGI for a modern Final Fantasy game has to, as decreed by ancient law, be absolutely incredible. And they remembered that here. That's probably why it drags on for quite a few minutes. It's an interesting early choice because it includes Lightning and Snow being in combat with one another. Lumina before we even know that she is Lumina, and some chatting before Snow heads off. And we have no idea what's being said, but perhaps the goal is to get you wondering just that. Why are Snow and Lightning fighting? Why has Snow suddenly grown a set of balls to the point he'll actually fight back against Lightning, which is something we've never seen, and not just letting her beat him up like usual. I always have to give him credit for just how much detail they put into the CGI stuff. It is insane, man. The cinematography, the direction, the art style, the expressive faces, and the fight scene itself, it's all meticulously planned out and detailed. No one does CGI cutscenes like Final Fantasy, and this was November of 2013, not even 2 years after 13.2 in December 2011. To do it that fast and that well so long ago, and still be unrivaled today, is always worth mentioning. Even the biggest critics often mention just how good the game looks, and can't be a coincidence. After this, it's another cutscene, but an in-engine one. Lightning's outfit is different because, and I only learned this now, New Game Plus retains all of your outfit customizations, including recolors, which we'll get into soon. Lightning's our narrator, unlike Vanille this time. I read on Reddit, then again it is Reddit so you never know, but somebody said that Vanille was supposed to be the protagonist of the first game. This sounds very funny, so I'll just believe it's true. Lightning clues us in and catches us up. which is always a bit odd when you think about it. You're in a main character talking to you right away, but that's coming from someone who can roll with it either way. First thing to note is how they're presenting her now, to be taking all the responsibility for Sarah's death in the last game, yet she also speaks of her goal to bring her back. Tells us about God himself, Boonvelza, reaching out to her and touching her with his warm, warm light. In the deal with him, Lightning then became the saviour to save people's souls and guide them into the new world that God intended to build. In return, he says she'll get Sarah back. I guess he just spoke to her and told her this with his warm, warm light. But yeah, this is what Booney says he'll do. He's going to give Lightning her Sarah back. After this, we're sent straight to the Ark. There's a limit break item as a clear game reward, and as ever, a data log with ours being already full, so I guess that carries over too. The Ark here is a man-made cocoon, the man-made cocoon that ended up being spectacularly useless after the end of 13.2, but has been repurposed, not simply Hope's way of monitoring the world down below, but also the place where the souls of humanity are kept after Light saves them during our playthrough. Sometimes it's difficult to appreciate the music in the Ark, no doubt due to the fact that it reminds me of how Hope was completely shafted by the writing team and now sits borderline motionless, his lemony pumpkin looking ass, a complete and total variance with the blinding whiteness around him. But on its own, the song is really good for the soul. It's got these dissonant little notes here and there to remind you to stay on your guard, and maybe it's emblematic of the game itself. Since this place is essentially a monument to Boonvelza, who we know in certain terms is a bastard, we just don't know it yet. I think what makes this song stand out though, outside of the triumphant moments and the peacefulness of it all, making you feel like you're ascending to heaven, is the simplicity of it. It's not crazy like most of the rest of the soundtrack, and it's not afraid to chill out and take its time, building up to its better moments, which is a welcome disparity when looked at relative to the rest of the game, wherein every nook and cranny of said game is presided over by that omniscient clock. The clock, yes, dictating your every move. Here though, it doesn't move an inch. I like that. Time is frozen here. Everything is simple, and it's a wonderful contrast to the rest of the world and the rest of the game too. With Hope here, it's a good shout to point out quickly that the characters of the series are another mechanism of the series, and very soon to be thoroughly trampled on and defiled as a mechanism, or in Hope's case, revealed to have been tortured by a god for approximately 169 years. And it's going to hurt, but it'll be interesting to see whether the game can pull it back within the other elements of the experience. In an eerie conversation with Hope, Light makes reference to the New Game Plus by saying she has deja vu, and I swear this was originally a conversation where Hope would just tell Light about the story in the world. If it is the case that it's only occurring due to New Game Plus, very nice touch. The game wants you to play it more than once, and this is just, this is the proof of that. We had evidence already, but now we have proof that this game is absolutely designed to be played multiple times. Whether or not you want to, well, that's on you. This is also why we completely bypass the opening gameplay section, wherein you're just thrown into battle with some random monsters and introduced to the new battle system in a very, admittedly, rudimentary way. We'll go over it later, because it's not really relevant just yet. And they were deliberately easy anyway. After about 10 minutes of this, just chasing Snow around through the palace as monsters jealously attack us for not paying attention to him, we would eventually hit a dead end anyway and get teleported back to the Ark. That's all we miss. But the omission of this section seems a nice little gift, possibly even a thank you from the devs, as if to say, yeah, skip that part, don't stress out about it, it's just a cold open, you've seen it before anyway. It is established that Lightning's trying to save Snow's soul, and that Snow has sealed himself inside his quarters of the palace in yusnaan, likely just to protect others as the chaos threatens to consume him in his almost hopeless state. In the Ark, Light will also give the player a rundown on who Hope is. Lightning also mentions how her emotions aren't quite what they should be, that she should feel more anger about God using her dead sister as a bargaining chip, but she has the insight to know what her emotions should be. It's like there's a hole where Sarah used to be, and she even theorizes that maybe God took away her emotions to keep his new world nice and pure. This is the first mention of such an idea, and it is pretty much the case. Her heart and soul have been damaged, and hearts and souls in JRPGs, as we all know, aren't just hearts and souls, they are like metaphysical anime wankery. Hope thinks this is maybe why he looks young again. Also true. But for us, it's straight to Luxerion. Immediately, you feel the overbearing nature of nighttime in Luxerion. Also, Lightning doesn't really fit in with these people all that well. But she's not supposed to. Hope tells us about the Order of Salvation, who worship Boonvelza, and it seems they have a fair bit of power here. And Vanille's with them, for some reason, alongside Lumina. A woman with pink hair has been murdered. A dummy of another woman with pink hair falls from high up, and these words appear.
Luxerion, the divine city of light. Is that what they call it? Trouble is, the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows.
We then see, obviously, Noel. Noel's having a moment. He'll have a few more of them in this story. We're forced into the first quest, and it really hits home just how bad this game looks and feels compared to 13 and 13.2. I ain't gonna pretend I know all the terms for video gamey visuals and optimization, or even that I can talk particularly well, but shapes wobble weirdly. The game's all jumpy. It's jumpy as hell, even what may or may not be 30 FPS. I think it's 30 FPS, but I'm not. Who really knows, right? And while these things aren't a priority for me, when they're this bad, they can actually make it a little difficult to ascertain what exactly I'm looking at times. Otherwise, I'd be cool with it. You know, some of the textures look like poo. A lot of them look like poo, but sometimes even the grass and things that aren't supposed to look like poo still look like poo. But that's less an issue for aesthetics because a lot of things in this game still look really, really good. And I get that it's supposed to be sort of washed out and it's a dying world and all that. And prettiness is sort of a transitory thing and you're going to find it on your own, but it can make it difficult to see exactly what you're looking at times, and that can get kind of annoying. It's worse in battle, actually, but had to mention it. You got to mention the bad and the good, right? I noticed the clock says 9 o'clock and we have 6 days left till the end, and so let's explain the time mechanic. Oh boy. Something I never knew during my first playthrough that I wish I did, but know now, is that the best thing you can do is fail the game the first time round, especially on normal mode, which feels very much like hard mode, but maybe I'm just crap at the game. Honestly, for your first go, I'd recommend easy mode. Normal mode kicked my ass the first time round. That said, I wasn't the kind of gamer back then to actually learn games properly. It was 2018, I think, early 2018. That's very different. The second time round, it was enough of a challenge on easy, so I'd recommend it. I think that it's aimed at die-hard JRPG fans. So what happens with this time mechanic is that the clock runs down, eventually ending on the final day, and if you haven't completed the requisite main story objectives, you will fail the game and get a proper game over. I've never seen if there's a cutscene for it, never happened to me, but that is what happens. But it's like the old Dead Rising games. Remember Dead Rising, the zombie games? In that, it'll put you into a new game plus and carry over your stats. If I'd known this, I would have been far less stressed about making sure I had literally everything I could get, but the game doesn't seem too interested in communicating this in any literal way. But to be honest, the more I went along with this game, the more I sort of appreciated the lack of hand-holding. Not just because it made it hard, but because it respects the player's intelligence to figure these things out, to ascertain certain things on their own. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. The structure goes, the world is ending, and that clock on the top right is the literal doomsday clock. You have a maximum of 14 days, which originally states, I think it was only about 6 or 7. But by doing enough quests and saving enough souls, you can make time seeds sprout on the wanky anime tree and get a few extra days to do more things, like the endgame dungeon, for instance, or just more side quests. On a final day, which is unlocked by the player, there is no time limit, you can just chill. If you can't complete everything the first time round, it's all good. Stats, most items, money, garbs, abilities, they all carry over into New Game Plus, and so you'll be able to do it quicker and easier each subsequent playthrough. Each day runs from 6 to 6, so 6 AM to 6 AM. So you'll see the sun come up and go back down again before the day is done, and you will never ever lose track of time. As nice as that would be, because Hope will continually harass you over his celestial telephone by reminding you about how much time you have each day, all the time, before the clock stops and teleports you back to the Ark against your will. Adds an element of urgency to the playthrough, I'll say that much. There's an ability in-game that you can spend points on that freezes time called chronostasis. So they certainly thought it through a fair bit. That's unlocked with EP, which you can get by doing battles. The harder the battle, the more the EP. The time mechanic may be annoying sometimes, but it does seem as though it was implemented as sensibly as possible. To be quite honest, the more I play the game, the less of a damn I give about the time mechanic thingy. It is what it is, man. But still, I would remove it if I could. These order guys are some of the worst designed people I've ever seen in a game. And this is a JRPG. So I've seen it all, man. The game seemingly wants to position them as an antagonistic organization, and they are the bad guys, but it is impossible to take them seriously. It's like I said, man, dressing weirdly is normal in a JRPG, but this is the worst thing ever. If it wasn't so funny, I'd be mortified. Before you can even talk to him for the quest, though, Hope hits you up on the codec. Now, this might seem inconsequential, but it's getting on to something that I find kind of annoying because it's just a little tip about why doing side quests is good and blah blah blah, but it's the first instance of something that's set to become outstandingly annoying. To even listen to his entire message is going to take time that you do not have. But you don't want to make the player pause the game to hear tips because it's like the MGS. If there's a big emphasis on that already, that's fine, but with a game like this that's mainly action, it's like, it wouldn't work. You know, it's not a stealth game. But yeah, his tips are mainly unnecessary, and they're unnecessarily long, I think is the most annoying thing. At some points in the game, he will have some amusing little lines of dialogue here and there, and we'll talk about them as they come, but for the most part, he'll just be a bother, and the beep of that codec will become a hemorrhoid that you can't get rid of. Here's the first example already. After getting your quest from Stupid Hairman to investigate the area for clues about the murder, Hope starts talking immediately after gameplay resumes. And so we run over to the glowing pink aura that's obviously our contextual clue. And just as we interact with it, Hope literally cuts himself off. He cuts himself off on the radio to beep you again on the radio with his next message. But before he can even talk about that, he's cut off again by the next cutscene. The way that they implemented this is disastrous. In order to hear everything he's saying, you have to deliberately arse around, not moving, not doing anything. And this is a game wherein every second counts, and a narrative is built around it so heavily that the gameplay mechanic's primary feature reflects as much via the clock that sits eternally on the top right of the screen. Ignoring Hope will become easier the more you do it. Eventually you'll just peripheralize him into the void, but it also means that that annoying beeping will interrupt any zen that you're able to gain from your experience with the game, for a little while at least, until you do peripheralize it. I mean, they should have just made him talk less. In this way, they really didn't respect the player's intelligence, but with many other elements of the time mechanic, and we'll get into one of these in yusnaan, when they let you fast forward a bit, they really do respect your intelligence. It's like sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, sometimes it's really well thought out, sometimes it's a haphazard mess. It's really odd, but I guess that's the kind of thing that'll happen when you have such a pressure cooker mechanic in the game. Maybe this is like a natural consequence of that kind of design, I suppose. He then calls us 4 more times as we collect various pieces of info. Eventually it becomes white noise. This is the best you can hope for, really. After grabbing the info, we discern that a group called the Children of Etro are out to get the evil savior, meaning us, and they've been mistaking others for lightning. During the gathering of the rest of the info, we're given a side quest to bleed us in, and it means finding homes, and they connect it to the main quest nicely. This is good. We just got to escort him to the station. It's nothing special. He just runs with a stick up his ass. Looks a little weird, but he follows us. It's all super simple, but that's probably a good way to introduce things. We probably should have stuck to this kind of design, but we saved both of their souls. Seems a bit much that their souls got saved due to a little escort mission, but we got a nice stat boost for completing the side quest. So we're luring in the Children of Etro, so we can follow them to their little hidey hole. But the problem is, this means tailing mission. Oh, Christ. It's like they're trying to punish us. I'll be honest, this early game is a complete mess. The early game is it's a fustercluck, you know? Just tailing one of these guys is bad enough with their terrible pathfinding, but like 8 of them is crazy. I do it a few times because I'm saving and reloading and grabbing footage and doing all sorts of things for the essay. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Either way, whether it works or not, it is funny watching them try to figure out the complexities of walking in a group. They are like headless chickens. Fun fact, I attacked them for defensive purposes, of course. And you can wipe them out. Just about all of them, and Hope will say, damn, that sucks. Anyway, plan B. I've received information somehow out of nowhere that you need to find a phone booth, and you just move along with the quest. You have to find some numbers on the walls of the town after 6 AM because they have a daily password to open the gate. So this really is pointless, and yet you can't fail it, I guess. It's really weird. Turns out opening the gate is wanky in just about every conceivable way. Conflicting emotions. For sure, on the one hand, I enjoy that they accounted for multiple tactics and ways of going about the mission, and on the other, it was so lazily done and terribly glued together that it might as well have just been entirely linear to stop it from falling apart like this. And this seems to be a microcosm for what happens throughout the entire game on a macro level. It's actually quicker to do it this way too, just attacking them. At least it was for me. I did the tailing version too, and they are annoyingly perceptive at times, and then at other times, not so. But only sometimes, you know, so you never know what you're going to get. They look like an Assassin's Creed MMO, but they can see you from the other end of the square. They can't climb ladders though. They'll lead you to the phone box, but the time it takes to do so really does just lend itself to not bothering and just killing them instead. So tomorrow, we have to find the number, and we have about 6 hours to do whatever we wish. This is good. It's a lot more relaxed now, meaning we can do side quests on Luxerion and find all the people in need of help to start said side quests, or we could do the same thing in yusnaan, even going so far as to start the main quest for that area. We could do the same for the wildlands or the dead dunes via train travel. And I'd have done just that if I wasn't running through the game in a more linear manner, as much as I could anyway, for the purposes of making this essay a little less tricky than it already was. But it's also a great idea to look around the town for side quests when you have the time, because the game won't inform you of side quests becoming available in the most literal sense, or even of their location on the map. You've got to find them yourself. There are contextual clues. You can talk to people with a question mark over their head and they'll say, hey, I saw a thingy, and it will say, you can go see the thingy. But this can lead to an overwhelming situation if you're in a real hurry for 5,000 different reasons at once and you see someone with some side quest stars on their head. Moments of reprieve such as this are a godsend for doing a few side quests, provided you're okay with compartmentalizing a little and pushing aside the other main quests in favor of focusing on one at a time when you can, until the time mechanic sort of starts to become a little more fluid, which on a first playthrough I would absolutely recommend. Keep it as simple as you can, as much as the game allows you to. The main quest structure, I guess, is laid out nice and simply, but the way in which you're allowed to approach it is a lot more relaxed than you might expect in a game with a clock in the top right that bears down on you. While the game does start you off in Luxerion and force you into an annoying tailing quest, it's not indicative of the general formula of the game. The way it manifested is, but the structure itself isn't really, because while 13 was hyperlinear and 13.2 was hyper non-linear in response, 13.3, alright, Lightning Returns, is sort of the middle ground. You've got these 4 areas that you need to do main quests in, but the order in which you tackle them is mainly up to you. You can feasibly do the vast majority of each main quest in each area and leave them all for days, then go back to them just when you feel like it. If you want to, maybe you want to prioritize side quests. You can also prioritize areas which appeal to you a lot more, but there is a difficulty to each quest, so it's not as easy as you might think. I mean, you're going to have more trouble fighting Caius than you do Noel, for instance, and Caius is up in the wildlands and Noel is the first boss that I recommend taking on first. That said, the vast majority of stat upgrades in this game come from rewards via side quests and changing your schema, and in exploring all these places, fighting different monsters, gathering items, and just generally experiencing the game, albeit outside of the parameters of the main quest, you will invariably find yourself progressively more equipped for whatever it is you do feel like prodding at with regards to the main story and giving it some attention. It's a level of freedom that only really hits because of how contained it is. I guess imprisoning certain elements makes the freedom feel a lot more free and liberating, even though it's not as free as it would be if the time mechanic wasn't there. It hits this weird, oddly lovely sweet spot in the middle of 13 and 13.2 in terms of linear to non-linear. If 13 is 12 at midday and 13.2 is midnight, then Lightning Returns is 6 PM. That's all I got. I appreciate it. Even if it took 2 distinct levels of extreme in order to pinpoint where exactly this sweet spot is, it's better late than never. A Lightning game is a pleasantly strange one, because side quests are your main source of stat increases and items now, meaning they're integral to doing well in a game. But on the flip side, they only half reset on the second go, because you keep your stat boosts, but the side quests revert back to their original state, both completed and uncompleted. I imagine the reason for this is very simple. Playing again would be weird without side quests, or only a few. And it also allows you to max out your stats this way. I'd wonder what the level cap is, but there actually isn't any level in the game, and it's literally just dawned on me. The first time round, I struggled to view side quests as anything more than chores, at least for the most part, but that's not to say that they're bad. The issue is that, as Hope himself says, the clock is your enemy. He actually says that. I don't remember when, but he did. And he's right, at least until New Game Plus, at which point it becomes maybe not a friend, less of an enemy. Turns out that when you're not bothered by the time limit, the stress naturally dissipates and the enjoyment is given a little more room to move with. As it happens, side quests are actually surprisingly thoughtful and funny and kind of wholesome. Seeing Lightning interact with people and show little pieces of her personality is a good way to showcase even the little increments that she ain't completely dead inside, and even Hope shows a little character in their interactions, alongside us learning about what Lumina's been up to off screen, usually in a way that directly impacts said side quests. It's about the only time that Hope's perpetual procession of interjections aren't an intrusive nuisance. It really does add to things.
I was never as good a cook as Sarah, but I have been told that I grill a pretty mean behemoth steak.
Some of these side quests took me by surprise of how thought out and expansive they are, especially for people we've only just met and will never speak to again. The NPCs aren't just nameless people. Many of them know each other. Their quests sometimes intersect, not only with other NPCs but with other quests as well, and there are some fun characters here with some funny little quirks. Hell, some side quests even turn out kind of dark and have some twists like something out of Nier Automata. You get stat boosts in New Game Plus as well, even from already completed quests, so even if you ain't into them all that much, the incentive's still there. On the topic of how they function, they are a big part of the game. In fact, most of your time will be spent stressing out about them, if you're anything like this guy right here. Side quests aren't too dissimilar from the main quests in Lightning Returns, except they're more particular with the time thing. Certain areas become accessible and inaccessible in a way that's contingent upon time of day, and some quests only even become available when a certain time is hit. And so there's a degree of planning and note-taking that is definitely required. I say definitely because even though the game is designed for multiple playthroughs, the reality of the situation with any game that tries to encourage the player to play the game more than once is that the player is only going to do that if they truly resonated with the experience in the first place, at least to some degree. And the only playthrough that's guaranteed is the first, and even then it's possible many will just drop the game before it ends. You never know how long that playthrough will actually be. With all of this in mind, I would advise taking notes in this way, and even following a guide. Just use a guide, it's okay, who's going to judge you? But try not to stress out about it like I did. Maybe just for the particularly difficult side quests, because they become annoyingly eccentric, and the game doesn't give you all the information, which I'd appreciate a lot more if the time thing wasn't about, but do still appreciate nonetheless. Part of this stress, I think, is that certain people need to be talked to, and yet they only appear in certain places at certain times, and the game isn't overly fond of informing you as to the particulars of such things, because in many ways it wants you to fail. It wants that, or at least fail a few things here and there so that you can learn the ropes yourself. It does respect the player's intelligence. In that vein, a guide will help you to figure out who's where, when, why, and how, so you can prioritize certain quests over others, because some of them take you across to different levels, and that takes time, even with chronostasis and really good planning. That said, fighting monsters as you go earns you EP, which buys chronostasis, so in some places you can keep a day going almost indefinitely. I wouldn't be surprised if there are certain spots to farm EP and keep it going forever, not that it's needed. There are some reavers in the wildlands that give you 4 EP each. With enough planning you could probably keep it going forever, not that you need to. But a drawback of this approach, though, is related to the sheer amount of quests. I mean, putting them all in a neat little section and separating quests by region is a cool idea. It's nice to compartmentalize things to stop them from weighing down too heavily on the player. And so that overwhelming nature will be mitigated, at least a little bit. It'll help with that, but there are way too many quests to keep track of all at once. And with a lack of guidance on how to see them through to the end so you can get the reward for it, it can become a mass of quests that makes it much more difficult to appreciate it, or even remember what you're doing at any given time. I distinctly recall various moments in playthrough 1 wherein everything became an absolute blur and I just started treating them like a checklist, which is a shame considering the good points I mentioned about side quests. And it's certainly a net negative when the rewards are absolutely vital to being well enough equipped by the end game to actually complete the thing, especially if you're not on easy mode. The variety is nice, but I'd have taken side quest sobriety over side quest variety, at least occasionally, especially considering the notice board quests called the Canvas of Prayers. There are actually, my word, 66 side quests. I suppose that explains why I don't remember much of any of them at all. I don't remember a single one, apart from the Alyssa one, despite 3 scattered playthroughs in approximately 7 years. Holy hell, man. But I will say that the side quests are a great look into the world and its people. They do make it feel alive and lived in. Can't say they're all interesting enough to justify it, but you're never going to get a game where that happens. You just need enough of them to be interesting and to keep your expectations in check, I think. But there are some moments of fun, some quality writing in there, and you'll be journeying the world anyway, just by necessity. I'd be interested in learning whether or not one could conceivably complete the game without doing side quests, and I looked it up. Yeah, YouTube yields nothing. What I got for it was a palpitation for leaning too far forward too quickly. As a sign, do the side quests or Boonavels is going to give me heart issues. My overall advice for side quests is to just do the easier ones as they come and let the harder ones stack up. And if you ever see someone, you might just end up running past someone that you just need to talk to and buy something off of, or just talk to. That's it, because they ain't going anywhere for the most part. Some involve gathering items with fetch quests that you'll naturally hit the quest completion requirements for just by naturally playing the game, I guess is what I'm saying. Then you can periodically browse all of them, made a lot easier by the menu segmenting them nicely into the areas you pick them up in, and then seeing if one calls out to you at that point in time. It's a similar approach to the Canvas of Prayers, the way I look at side quests. And when you think about it, these really are just extra side quests, like super side quests, side quests? I don't know. These are mainly fetch quests and monster extermination missions, and they aren't even remotely as fleshed out as the main or side quest proper, and thank goodness for that, they're not supposed to be. It's a relief, because with a time limit I can only take so much until my brain melts from the stress of it all. This is especially funny when you look up the wiki and it tells you there are 83 of these things in the game. They take you across all areas, and some of them are global, ready to be accepted anywhere you choose. This is another great way to get stat boosts and gil and adornments, because lightning without a mustache doesn't seem right, okay? It just doesn't. My personal rule is that you need at least one funny costume, one cool costume, and a third costume that's just specifically dedicated to optimization of stats and equipment and playing well. In 13.2 there was an area called the Dying World, but to be honest it was a dead world. no vegetation, no colour, no anything, but the dying world of Nova Chrysalia is what I like to imagine a real dying world would look like. Like actually. Nova Chrysalia is its name, similar to Nova Chrysalis from the Fabula Nova Chrysalis tagline of the series, which actually extended to Final Fantasy Type 0, Versus 13, and technically 15. Then the most they did for that one was add a xiii at some point. But it was. The world of Nova Chrysalia very much embodies the Fabula Nova subseries at this point. Dying, decayed, once full of promise and magic, just now barely hanging on, perhaps in the hope of something better coming along, if it can hold out for long enough and with some magic still lingering over, mainly in the form of nostalgia, but not always. The brightest anything will ever burn is near its end, and the absolute best of humanity comes when you're under extreme pressure, as does the worst. So I think of a dying society as inexorable to the concept of a dying world, given all the bright lights of Yusnaan and the natural vibe of the wildlands. Pulse and Valhalla, the unseen realm from 13.2, merged together at the end of that game when Caius was stabbed by Caius, basically. And Etro died. It's been nearly 500 years since that day though, and in that time the world has shriveled up like a teeny weeny walnut, and we're left now with only 4 distinct places of geographical significance and a lot of chaos in between. Luxerion, an archaic looking little town, with a nice vibe by day and a dark one by night. Yusnaan, its polar opposite, which seems almost lifeless by day and comes alive at night instead. The Wildlands, a natural area with an abundance of nature, hopefulness, and some good green. And the Dead Dunes, a desert that very few call home, except for a group of bandits headed up by Fang. These 4 corners of the world can be explored in any order, excluding Luxerion, where you're dropped initially, and each of them is beautiful and unique in the ways in which it pulls you into its atmosphere. Lightning Returns can be an annoying game, and on your first playthrough, stopping and soaking up the atmosphere is punishable by literal time. But it's all unique and exciting enough that I've been excited about the New Game Plus on account of actually being able to absorb it all fully. During the first time through, the idea of exploring the world and enjoying it just isn't commensurate with playing efficiently, and that ain't just because the clock's always ticking and pushing you around all the time, but also due to the constant juggling of side quests and main quests, and optional ones, all demanding your attention all the time, meaning you're always trying to be somewhere all the time as quick as possible, or buying something, or just talking to an NPC instead of looking around. Just optimization, optimal. I'm used to wonderfully crafted worlds that invite you to explore them, but this is the first instance I've ever seen of a world in a game that's going to punish you for fully and genuinely appreciating it. But in New Game Plus, you really can just slow down and take in each level as it was intended. Of all the things that persuaded me to go through with the whole trilogy, the individual ambience of each locational archetype was at the absolute peak and summit of Mount Autism, and provided me with that push. And I needed the incentive to play it again upon remembering this one little fact. This game is at perpetual odds with any enjoyment you might get out of it, almost as though it doesn't want to be enjoyed sometimes. You know, the reason that the design of the game, I'm talking about the time mechanic by the way, is a pure antithetical gunshot to the head of any mere notion of exploration is because exploration is about discovery, and we explore in order to discover. And what we discover, we typically tend to enjoy looking at and admiring, and those are best done at ease. That's the whole point. So what you have here with the Magical Gale Lightning game is a mechanic that precludes any laid-back enjoyment of the world that it's specifically built for you to explore, one must assume anyway, unless you're on a second playthrough, with the very well being among some of the finest you'll ever see in terms of atmosphere and creativity and sheer vibrancy. What we'll do today is shine a light on each level as I touch down on it, which will likely be the same order in which I always do it. The world really is where the game comes alive, so there's much I've been looking forward to. My eyes! Well, I can't find any definitive official information as to the real world inspiration for any of the main hubs in the world. It's no more important than how we, as players, perceive the places ourselves. As a starter area, it's good, in that it's condensed into a place you can get from one end of to the other in a fairly generous time frame, which is important because this is where you'll discover the intricacies of the time mechanic. So it's nice and laid back in how much it'll punish you for that. Now it will punish you nonetheless, albeit with a delayed effect. Luxerion's a town of 2 halves. By day it's hopeful and optimistic, and by night it's sinister and unforgiving. Aesthetics, vibes, whatever descriptor you want to throw at the place, it feels calm and collected when the sun's out and cold and uncaring when that sun goes down. The Warrens in particular are special because of this one song here, and the fact that you descend really far down into the slum area. And you can't even get in by day, and I think that adds to the unknown ambience of the place. So in a sense, for the player, barring out of bounds wizardry, it doesn't exist at all during the day. Not for us, total non-entity, just a gate with something behind it until the sun ain't around to shine on it no more. The black and white tiles on the floor are textbook 13 trilogy, just like in the Void Beyond or later on in Boonevels's boss arena. My original theory was that the entire world and its people are Boonevels's chessboard and chess pieces, and that this is the physical manifestation of that. It's the kind of attention to detail that the Gapra Whitewood and the Sunleft Waterscape had in 13, but far less subtle, and very possibly all in my head. Because the fact is, I did look it up eventually, and upon diving into the themes of the town of Luxerion, a quote from the art director states that Luxerion's monochromatic colour scheme is intended to represent a surreal Twilight, which would make a really good band name, merging gothic, medieval, modern and fantasy designs. The ethereal colour palette, partially representing Valhalla, was not in my head, and it looks like I was on the money there, at least, as it's referenced in the wiki. So I got one. The director, Toriyama, mentioned the grim tone, symbolising the strong awareness of death, and I think that he and the art director did a wonderful job with that. And the always wonderful soundtrack is the final piece of the puzzle that brings Luxerion into grim, understated life, we'll say. Fantastic choice for an open world hub location. They weren't afraid to embrace the themes that they were going for really early on, and the honesty and truthfulness to the vision is why I think it came out so authentic. It also leaves a lasting impression even now. The locations of Lightning Returns will always run antithetical to the lively and vibrant panoramas of 13 and 13.2, but there's a cleverness in this that I can't ever deny. Over time I've learned to appreciate a lack of colour when it makes a point like this. Luxerion's a nice place.
Stylish.
Technically, every single game in the 13 trilogy is a halfway point between completely turn-based and pure action combat. Most modern FF games share that distinction, and it's always some variant of the ATB system, even when developers choose slightly different or slightly more exaggerated and eccentric and esoteric pretentious code words to describe them. 13's was actually called the Command Synergy Battle System, and while it sounds great and sort of like an STD that I'm in no hurry to get, it's okay because I have it on very good authority from an insider that Final Fantasy 17 will introduce the fluid hybrid chocolate waffle battle system. Chocolate starfish, maybe? I'll ask my inside source at some point. Chocolate sauce. But this one is different and similar to 13 and 13.2 in equal enough measure, relying again on a frenetic pace, constant changes and quick thinking, but this time with outfit changes in lieu of paradigm shifts. I think Final Fantasy X-2 did something similar. Oh shit, when I do 10 I could do 10 too. So, okay, never mind. Timing regarding blocks and parrying are now a huge factor in staggering an opponent and just staying alive. There are 3 types of guarding, and they can be best summarized as terrible, alright, and perfect. Mistime it and get whomped. Get it alright and you'll negate much of the damage, but not all of it. Time it perfectly and the corresponding sound effect will let you know you've guarded it completely, and put your enemy closer to a stagger, probably. The perfect is similar to how the game has a function for a perfect attack, in that doing it at just the right time. The game says a perfect guard is when you pull it off just before the enemy attacks, will net you a positive effect. With the guard, it can even stagger an opponent right away sometimes, so learning it has use cases not just for defensive purposes, but offensive purposes as well. Offensive purposes, what a world we live in today. You can also move around the battle area freely and get a better look at the situation by pressing the R3 button, or whatever its equivalent is, to get a broader scope. We're back to initiating combat via enemies on the field though, which is nice actually, because I'm not a fan of random encounters. 13.2 was nice about it, and you could often run away from those battles and save yourself preemptively. It's not like, say, Final Fantasy X, where the screen just literally shatters and scares the shit out of you and ruins the music and da 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 da. You know, this one allows you to run away even faster, so it's much easier to escape. That's right, there's a sprint button. It took a time mechanic to give us this feature, but it's here nonetheless. That's 1 point for the time thing, actually. The system is much more fleshed out than I initially realized, and it also explains why I was so bad at the game the first time through. And you can no doubt see here with the perfect timing system and its slight differences in magic and physical attack requirements. Attack just after a physical attack for that one, and just after releasing a spell for the magic variant. You can even break off certain enemy parts like a Monster Hunter game or something. It adds another dimension to the movement other than just not staying still like a sitting duck, giving you an option to take out a tail by getting behind a monster and shoving your sword up its ass. But that can be difficult. I mean, the enemies can move too, spin on their axes, but enemies grow stronger as the game nears its final day, so it's a good idea to continually engage in battles, even if you feel like you're where you need to be in terms of skill and you have enough EP. Keeps you from getting rusty, you never know what's waiting for you. And of course you have the last ones. There are actually a finite amount of every monster, and slaying enough of any kind will eventually present you with the last of its kind. They really should have played Noel's theme when these things pop up. They're a shade of wanky magenta that assaults the eyes. No, it's more like a pink, and they look absolutely bloody horrendous. They look like that pink slime that they put in chicken. But a lot of the things in this game do look pretty bad, so at least they're eerily consistent with the world in which they inhabit. But, you know, there are lovely things in the game too. I think I talked about that. It looks bad and it looks lovely. It's like a clash. You get used to it. They're the toughest of the lot, these Omegas, the last ones, because they look a lot like Boonavelza. Took a big poo after drinking too much strawberry milkshake. Here is a table of the enemies and the amount you need to cull before you've achieved a sufficient genocidal clarity to make the world a much safer place in their absence, even though it's going to end soon anyway. So basically, slay every gremlin you find, and every of those little hobnob things. What is it? Goblet? Niblet? Something like that. Bad part though is that there's no running counter that's available to the player. The game keeps track of it, obviously does, because how else would it know to make one appear, but it ain't telling you how many you've got so far. So it's all just a feeling, I guess. Unless I've missed it, unless it's somewhere. I even looked at the bestiary. Why isn't it called a bestiary? It should be... Well, in 13 they were just there. In 13.2 they were our precious Pokemon as well as our enemies, and now monsters in 13.3, Lightning Returns, are just the last of their kind in the wild. If Danganronpa taught me anything, it's that despair is kind of pink, so these guys are true to that at least. And it's our job to exterminate them for defensive... I've run that joke into the ground, never mind. If you're wondering where that comes from, it was a Metal Gear Solid video. I don't know if it's out yet. Garbs are the outfits you have and part of the new schemata system, called schema for short. There are loads of them, both are annoying to say, but this system it's bloody good, you know. I really like it. The idea is surprisingly simple actually. You get an ATB allowance for each of the free schema you have equipped. So your total ATB is all three of these combined, and not just whichever one you're using at the time, because changing doesn't cost any ATB at all. Some schemas start with a base amount of ATB that's lower than you might want, and you've got to let it charge before you can use it. Some start at 100. They're all different. They all have certain perks, certain negatives, certain positives, and it's worth engaging with. You have a default amount of strength and magic and ATB attached to each one, just as with your character too, before your shield and weapon and accessories add to that, or in some cases actually subtract from it, and this is essentially your combat setup. I mean, you could envision it like the roles and the paradigm deck in a way, but we're free to choose from in battle, and the ability to interchange them on the fly in an instant, unlike 13 and 13.2, wherein it took a few seconds and you could be punished for it, and they even developed an ATB trick that I remember saying I didn't know if it was intended or not, but I would guess it was. And now you have 6 separate sub-schema in reserve via the pause menu, which will expedite a lot of things and save you some time. The idea seems to be that there's a lot of room for customization here, in fact serious customization, because there are so many moves now as a result, so many. But while healing moves are now gone and replaced completely by items, with the exception of Mediguard, and these items are in perpetually scarce supply. That is why guarding successfully is all the more important now. You can't just carry 99 high potions on you anymore, you have a finite amount. With a perfectly timed guard, initiating a counter that will open the enemy up for a counter attack and dramatically raise their stagger meter, maybe even staggering them on the spot. The Reavers, all you've got to do is just guard against them, even if it's not a perfect guard, and it will stagger them. It's funny, but they're all different that way. Keeps you guessing. Some are easy to exploit in a way that you might not expect it to be. Either that's an oversight or that's actually very intelligent in a funny way. But they are now, these stagger meters, represented by these funny squiggly lines that remind me of when I went into the hospital and they were looking at my heart rate. You know, they're about as crazy as my heart rate was too, because they're just squiggly lines. It looks like an SVT. So we don't have the number anymore. You got to get a feeling for this one. But they give you a corresponding color. The darker it gets, it's like, oh, that's red now, you know. You got to get a feeling for it. And it's a much more visceral battle system as a result. And while I do prefer the other ones, I appreciate it for sure. It's unique to take out healing spells and replace them with items that you can only hold a certain amount of at any time, because you can't just stock up and breeze through it, so I do appreciate that too. And there is a level of intelligence to that, because there's no better way to ensure that the player really does make sure to get good at blocking and parrying. In this instance, highlighted by punishing the player very severely for not being any good at it, even on the easiest difficulty. Of all of the 13 Trilogy games, this seems to be the one that feels the most difficult, like it's for the hardcore players. I mean, it is unforgiving at times. I remember the first playthrough on normal. Big mistake. I got my ass handed to me by this game. I remember when I first faced Noel and I was like, what the hell? I am not as good as I thought I was. You can also assign a specific weapon and shield to each setup, as mentioned. In fact, it's required, I believe, in which both come with certain abilities that will work much better with some things and worse with others. Hell, level up the moves themselves and you'll get bonus abilities too. I like to think of my free main schema as being analogous to the roles in the last two games, one for each role, so to speak. They can go deeper than that, but this analogy gives me a point of reference, I guess. I mean, this is all late game stuff via New Game Plus, but the overall principle carries all the way through the game. The idea is balance. I think that's what got me through the game. Now, as we go along, we'll see new schema. At some point, I'll get the Mikyote dress, and that'll be a lovely time. But for now, I had these things free to start with. Volcel is the all-rounder with the best strength, magic, and ATB stats. Really simple, and with the element effect that comes with it not being replaceable or removable, it can be kind of annoying, but the three that you do get to choose are, in this instance, a simple guard, magic attack, and a physical attack that I went with. It's simple, but sometimes that's better. At least to start with, anyway. Based as fuck is almost the same thing, but slightly less decent. I could probably have personalized it a little more, certainly into something far more efficient, but I'm lazy and I know it works. This one has a Medigard, which actually allows you to heal in battle, which is huge if you're struggling, and especially if your opponent is slow as hell. If it's not easy mode, then your HP won't recover. You have to eat food at restaurants. But the thing that really makes it based is that it greatly hastens the ATB recovery of other schema while it's in use, which is what made me keep it around for so long before eventually replacing it. Planet Reed is my earnest and stubborn attempt to recapture the magic of the Saboteur paradigm from games past, in that I just stuck D-Shell and D-Protect on it. I didn't even bother with a guard. You don't need a guard on every paradigm. I think that's just playing it too safe. It's kind of like 13 in a way, wherein playing it too safe was actively detrimental and dangerous. I just wanted to know, personally, if these debuff attacks were as effective as they were in games past, or if they've been nerfed, and they're still very good. D-Shell and D-Protect. I can't imagine not having them on at least one schema. I used to have a guard on every schema, but I'm an adventurous man now and I'm living on the edge. Yeah. As the game went on, I found that I wanted to experiment more, and later made White Mage Ho, which mainly became a main schema just because of how cool it looks, and I wanted it for cutscenes, before I swapped that for the Mikyote dress, which became the cutscene thing, to which I didn't apply a Medigard because I had one elsewhere. I guess the idea is, don't let the original name of the schema box you into doing things in a specific way. It was called White Mage before I called it White Mage Ho, but it doesn't need a Medigard, considering how I do things. And the idea is to just do things your way, and I dig that the game does it. It's just a name. Also, based AF, after the fall. Well, eventually made way for a Sharon Kruger paradigm. Schema, damn it, I still do it. Well, it's called Sharon Kruger, which looks really cool, but also has an ability that transforms Punt, a move built into the schema, into Whirlwind Kick, which is very fun to use and it's very efficient. You can get a good combo going with that, and it's accompanied by Charge Strike, which rewards taking a risk and holding it down for longer, thereby doing far more damage. This at first was sort of a once in a while schema that was fun to bring in for variety, that I eventually just settled on and incorporated into my main free. Unlike this magical one that I just stuck a load of magic attacks on, just to have some fun with it occasionally. Being able to select a schema as your main for cutscenes and as your first in battle is great. It's basically the default schema, and having the utility to have 3 main ones and 6 in reserve means that once you made 9 main ones, you can easily just swap between them. I can't see why you'd need more than that, unless you're some light and returns expert who's capable of utterly destroying the super bosses and omegas in the optional dungeon near the end. The idea seems to be lightning can do anything now. Mage, Dragoon, Warrior, Mage, anything, everything. Now, there's only 4 slots in each one, but due to having 3 active variants to choose from at any given point during battle, that actually makes a total of 12 possible moves for any battle at any point in time, given that you've got the ATB for it. So there are actually loads to choose from and customize, but you're limited to the 3 main schema, because anything more than that would probably be overkill. They balance the game well enough that I couldn't find a way to cheese it, but maybe you hold the key to Cheese City. I'm sure the speedrunners figured it out years ago. The idea is you can really diversify your setup and create yourself a wide array of different moves. So there's a level of customization there that has a lot more depth than 13 or 13.2. It's neither better nor worse, it's just different. Some like it, some don't. But personally, my favourite is 13. 13T's monster mechanic kind of stressed me out before I learned it, and this one I'm just not as good at, so it's harder to enjoy, even if I do enjoy it all around. But maybe you'll like the added real-time nature of this one. There's something for everyone, I guess, in this trilogy. Every move does cost ATB, even if it only costs a little, so do be sure to cycle through all 3 options regularly in battle instead of leaning too heavily on any particular one, and maybe try to build a mental map of the schema, similar to how you swap paradigms in 13 on the fly. In fact, I think that soon enough, and this happened with me, you'll just get used to this one too, and you'll know which moves are where and which buttons to press, and just get a feel for how far along you are with the ATB gauge without even looking, so you can draw upon the corresponding schema as and when you need to. For instance, you could theoretically stick heavy slash on every schema you have, but the ATB cost is far more expensive. Conversely, you could just stick light slash and everything and keep building a stagger bar for much longer, while your other schema rebuild their ATB gauges. There are loads of ways to do it, but the idea is you build a level of familiarity with it, and I think that micromanagement has never been something I excel at, but considering I completed the game 3 times now, wait no, twice, the first time I didn't. If an idiot like me can do it twice, you will be fine. I'm in no way good at this battle system, and I'd put good money on it being the overwhelmingly customizable nature of it all. But it's 2 sides of a single coin, isn't it? You know, on the one hand you can build something genuinely overpowered, but on the other you could do it so terribly in a grand amalgam of ways that there's plenty of variety to both fail and triumph with this system. And I appreciate that level of detail, even if I do suck at it. As mentioned a bit ago, certain schema do come with certain moves locked to that specific one whether you like it or not, and sometimes it's worth it just for the schema stats, and sometimes you look at it and go, nah, I'll stick with this one. You can also name them, so be creative and have fun, let your personality shine through. But remember that this is a very serious game, so you can't make any silly names, ever. Overclock is the sort of limit break type move in this game, and it allows you to attack quicker for 1 EP, and you can eventually follow up that attack with an army of 1 for another EP, which cycles through each schema to hit enemies for much greater damage. And it just looks fun, it feels nice to do. She swaps between the costumes, it's very cinematic, and in the final battle, Lightning has some unique dialogue for it too. Also, when you're done with it, all of your ATB gauges will be completely recharged. So if you're thinking about doing it, you'll probably want to use them up first, just to get that extra bit of damage, if you have the time to do it. Like I said, fast-paced battle system. Always thinking, always thinking, always thinking. I like it. I do. Also, the synthesis shop allows you to combine and purchase moves, and the forge allows you to upgrade and buy weapons and shields. They're placed right next to each other, because sometimes the game is very nice like that. As for another element of combat, it's a side thing, admittedly, and I still finish the game regardless, but sometimes the visual effects, while very nice looking, can really clutter the screen and make it almost impossible to see your enemy. So you don't know what's about to emerge from that whirlwind or whatever the enemy deployed during its area attack. Whether it's purposeful or not, it really muddles the screen and adds a level of quite unfair difficulty in my eyes, doubled by how fast everything is always moving. But other than that, definitely serviceable, only a minor nitpick, never affected me too much. Choosing colours is one thing, and I love it to pieces, but only the most based game developers grant you access to the colour wheel. Yes, the colour wheel. Ever wonder what Lightning's 13 or 13.2 outfit would look like of a recolor? Go for it. Boots, top, bottoms, you can change all of it. Color-wise, anyway. Shame we can't change our hair too, but Toriyama can't give us that much access to his precious eclair farron. He's very protective of her. This kind of thing never really came into fashion in the modern gaming landscape, and I can't figure out why. Even within retro games, and I've always hated it because I know I'm not a game dev, so I might be wrong, but it seems so easy to do and implement, just a simple recolor, choosing the color of a thing, you know? Just the option to have multiple outfits isn't even looked at anymore, except when shareholders need to be appeased, so the devs are told to implement costumes in whatever way squeezes the most money out of players via insidious microtransactions. But the fact that this game made a mechanic out of costumes is awesome. I love that. I talk about Final Fantasy XIV and One of the Player. The main reason is just clothing and attire. I think, what is it? They call it glam. Glam. But it looks fun, doesn't it? It's not manly, but like, whatever. And I don't care how cringe or lame it seems. Sure, most of them don't suit Lightning's personality at all, but the option's there. And that's what truly matters. That's what really counts. Nowadays, this kind of thing is indigenous to the PC versions of games via mods that are made by the fans of the games. So this level of customization is awesome to see. I love that they let you change your colour. It seems so simple and so silly, but it's actually really deep that they cared enough, you know? There are an absolute ton of adornments that you can wear as well, and they've likely been playing in the background while I discuss these other things, so I needn't go into each one specifically, but you can really kill the seriousness of a scene with these, so either watch out or go wild, or both. Speaking of Lightning's aesthetics, with Lightning it's another game, another slight redesign, and the costume is not fixed this time, but rather she gets loads. As for her design in general, that's really interesting in a weirdly funny way. It's been 500 years this time around, so I guess Crystal Pepsi either doesn't stop you from aging completely, or perhaps just makes your face a little sharper.
You're looking at her.
It's like mewing. All that crystal iciness has really sharpened Lightning's facial features. She still looks like herself, but it's interesting to put her side by side with her 13 and 13.2 version. This is perhaps the biggest jump in Lightning's facial changes though. Weird thing to point out, I know it's kind of weird to point out, but it's also a weird thing to do. A theory I would run with, personally, is that they just appealed to whatever beauty standards were cool at the time, or what got Toriyama the biggest hit of serotonin, because he loves Lightning, man. You should see the way he talks about her. Holy crap. Thing is, Lightning was quite round-faced at 13 and got a slimmer design in 13.2 in the face, and now she's full-on fashion model in the face and body with the slimness. The CGI version looks different too. Nothing against it, I just find it interesting to observe. I always have. And I wonder what makes a character designer change the look of a person, namely twice. But I know that Lightning was designed by Nomura and created by Toriyama. And I also know he's absolutely obsessed with her and nothing else is known to me. Maybe it's best this way. I mean, Toriyama literally got Tetsuya Nomura to help him make his dream waifu. So I believe what we're actually witnessing here is Toriyama's changing tastes in women. The man's living his dream. No wonder Lightning didn't have a romance with anybody. Toriyama wouldn't allow it. There were little hints in and outside of the game that hint at Hope maybe loving Lightning, but she seems almost entirely disinterested in anything like that. It's just funny to think about. I wish I had a new world to build and souls to save so I didn't have to worry about romance shit. To cap off the costume stuff, most of the costumes are normal enough for Lightning, but some of them don't fit her personality at all, meaning they can make scenes really funny and turn the game into one big joke. If this appeals to you, you're in for a fun time. If it doesn't, it won't hurt you. Put her in that glorified lingerie that doesn't fit her personality at all, give her a mustache, and let the anime happen. That's what I say, let the anime happen. Shut up, chair.
All started back when...
Wait, never mind. I trust you. You're on my side. Please, stop talking.
Back at the Ark, we offer some saved souls to the mystic tree of anime. That's a Radia, and it grants us an extra tree seed thing that grants us an extra day. I do like how they've established an interconnection with side quests and the time mechanic. It's another incentive to dive into them when you're engaging with the system that rewards you more each time, and with time, which is the game's most precious commodity and most valuable currency. Gotta note that after spending even half a day in the overworld down below, returning to the Ark really showcases just how dark it all is down there by seeing how bright it is up here, regardless of the city you're in. The color palette's really subdued for the most part, and I imagine that's why it stands out more when Yusnaan, for instance, makes itself known, or when the wildlands come into view for the first time. But I do wonder if the inherent disparity between this godly realm, where time stands still, and the world below, where they don't have the luxury of this kind of safety, is on purpose. And my answer is almost definitely. Almost definitely. Great use of artistic framework in that case to make a point. I appreciate you, video game art people, though I do wonder how much the PS3's ancient architecture had to do with the colours never quite seeming right with the games of this era. I don't know how else to put it. To be honest, the games look really pretty, but quite bad in terms of graphics at times, and the art direction is the real saviour for the most part. I hope it just straight up says, with regards to the side quests, I mean, that not everybody can be saved. There's quite a lot of emphasis on the way you put it, so maybe this is the game's way of expressly communicating that you're not getting everything done in one go, and also to prioritise the more elaborate quests, in a sense anyway, maybe even the simpler ones. But some quests pay much better, some have better rewards, some give more stars. That said, I'd say just wing it like I did. You'd probably be stressed out anyway. What's a little more stress? As for the main quest, the structure is going to be that there are 4 locations with 5 people that need our help. The game stressed the importance of these people, which is ironic considering that they are the characters that the writers forgot about for so long. We got Snow, Vanille, Caius, Yeul, Fang, and then eventually Sazh with a return to the Wildlands. And I think that spacing them out like this was a very good call, although I would have liked to see them all interact with each other more. But if you're not going to do that, then yeah, do it in this way. I mean, you ain't going to stick them all in the first city. But I feel like the locations we'll find each character in do best represent them as people. Never appreciated that before, but I realised it in this playthrough actually. It's something they got really right with the character writing, and I've got to give that some praise. Now this, I didn't know. In much the same way you can let the clock wind down and face the end of the world, not having saved the souls of your friends, thus rendering it a game over and a bad ending, only to try again in a New Game Plus, you can actually trigger what is essentially a New Game Plus via the Crystal of Atonement in the Ark. I guess it's a way to do things over without the hassle of letting things occur naturally, and it's a very good idea. Points for that for sure, because you can carry over everything you do in a normal New Game Plus, but the game encourages you to only use it as a last resort. I guess if you're really struggling with the game, even on New Game Plus, then it's a useful thing to have, and maybe you can redo the first few arcs over and over again to get the stats you need, and it will certainly help on the hardest difficulty. That said, even things that aren't necessarily needed are still appreciated in games. I like that. Options and agency is always a good thing. Options like this, in particular, actually keep the game feeling open, which is important when so much of the experience is locked behind that arbitrary and conditional stuff, like the time stuff. Lumina approaches us in some pocket dimension or something, and Hope can't hear us, meaning Booney can't either. We're inside Lightning. Lumina's fun, and she's a little shitbean and annoying, but that's her charm, I guess, isn't it? She tells us that everything Hope hears gets passed on to Booney, and encourages Grumpy to be honest with herself, planting the first instance of rebellion in Light, or rather Light's planting it in herself. We got onto that later. Lightning says she has nothing to hide, Lumina says Lightning's afraid and Lightning's shook. Then Sarah appears via an apparition, and this might be the game's way of showing us that our Lightning is still in there somewhere, and that there's a repression of emotions going on. This section involves getting you to run around Luxerion in a way you probably haven't yet, all in order to find 4 separate numbers written in glowy magical paint on various walls around the city. You have the wharf, the warehouse district, the south station, and the warrens. After grabbing the first, we see Noel, and the game ain't even trying to hide it anymore. Well, it never was it? The last one resides in the warrens though, which you'll only have had a chance to visit once before it appeared, meaning no matter how quick you get the first 3 numbers, you have to wait until midnight on the second day to advance things. This might seem annoying, but it seems to be a way actually of getting the player to actively engage in side quests and exploration. Once again, you can technically engage with literally any other made quest, but if 13.2 has taught me anything, is that non-linearity is not the all-curing panacea that some have been tricked into thinking that it is. If it's your first time, I'd absolutely recommend keeping things at least somewhat linear until midday and doing some side quests here and there, allowing you to feel more comfortable with the flow of the game and the flow of time and space within the game's own confines, and then dipping your toes into yusnaan. Worth mentioning! It turns out that while side quests do repeat and grant rewards every playthrough, those stat boosts in question are severely reduced. I knew they were reduced to some degree, but not this much. Still, every increase matters. Speaking of which, on the right side of the screen, if you look over it, you will see just how important side quests are to your stats, and how much extra stuff you can accumulate even early into your second playthrough, which is when I was when I took that little clip. The children of Etro are very annoying with all of this killing people stuff, and so we enter the warrens for the final number of their daily password to gain access to their cool club up in the cemetery, where they sacrifice pink-haired chicks because they think it's lightning. Lumina reintroduces the Oracle Drive. Very important thing from Final Fantasy 13-2, which shows Noel killing us, and then he attacks us, claiming that we're going to destroy the world because the Oracle Drive said so. But the time to fight isn't now, apparently. The idea that all it takes to make Noel a believer to the point of trying to kill Lightning to save the world is a bloody Oracle Drive makes sense on paper, but you'd think he'd be at least a bit more skeptical. But no, he just goes with it. Maybe the 500 years drove him mad, but the game doesn't allude to that in any way at all, and I don't want to make excuses for it. Up at the cemetery, well, the promised time is upon us. Some poor girl's about to get sacrificed and Lightning and Noel stop it from happening. These guys, calling Noel the Shadow Hunter, just started panicking and killing any pink-haired chick.
I've been fighting destiny for a long time now, and I'm getting good at it.
So we follow Noel down into the warrens and find him watching the Oracle Drive. It didn't work last time, and it's unethical to straight up kill Lightning just so we can have Yeul back and frolic in the fields, which is very, very funny. He and Lightning are very similar in this regard, and I like the parallel. I suppose that Noel allowing himself to be duped by the Oracle Drive, as he has, could be attributed to his grief and his guilt, since Yeul died and Noel had a hand in the end of the world. But we have 2 issues here. One is that he hasn't mentioned Sarah once, which is weird and admittedly an aside. And 2, if he was really that far gone, the writers could have shown it in many other ways, and they didn't. One of the best things about 13 was its show don't tell attitude, and that admittedly did lead to a lot of things being missed or outright misinterpreted, but I think it could have helped here. Either way, the parallel is good, and Noel wants a future with Yeul, Lightning wants a future with Sarah, so it's fight time. Noel's boss battle then. Noel is quick, he deals a lot of damage, but he's purposefully simple compared to the other boss fights in that, other than using perfect timing in your attacks, you've just got to time your guard well. He'll likely be the first boss in anyone's playthrough, so I like that beating him is as simple as mastering the rudimentary elements of the combat system as opposed to something crazy. Get a few perfectly timed parries in a row and you can stagger him, then have your fun. But he will come back and you got to do it quite a few times. So don't worry about using all your EP in a fight, because you'll get 10 from this one. I believe you get 10 from every boss. After the fight, Noel from 13.2 returns. In a sense, he has the chance to finish Lightning off despite her besting him, but destroys the drive instead. He realizes how obsessed he was, but a vision of Yeul brings him round. Ironic, considering a vision of Yeul sent him down the crazy path, but we'll take it, won't we? He's sorry for literally trying to kill us, and that's very nice of him, and Lightning tells him about the new world that she's building for Univelsa. We save Noel's soul, literally, and his old self comes back with this renewed hope, and Lightning does a smile thingy. It's not overdone, it's not overstated, but I've come to appreciate that about this game. It is the point, and they're consistent with these smaller gestures. Lightning's still in there, but it's only showed in reserved little moments. Sometimes that's a downer. sometimes it's really, really good. Sort of oscillates between those two paradigms. Noel. Noel was one of the wiser members of the cast in 13.2, but he unfortunately has become very stupid. When writers write stupidly, characters follow them closely into this metaphorical abyss, and so let's explore Noel's idiocracy, while also not pretending that it makes him unique in this regard in this game. He starts out all shady and mysterious, but it's obviously him, and it never really hits the mark. This shadow hunter thing is like some teenage phase of his, except he's like over 500 years old. But let's not judge the lad. Everyone blossoms at their own pace. He's been duped into thinking that he needs to kill lightning, and he's apparently relinquished his common sense and critical thinking skills in the Sea of Chaos, or just left them behind when he was in Valhalla, because the madman actually gives it a go and it becomes the first boss fight of the game. Lightning beats him because she's cooler, but yeah, terrible return for him. He's upset about Sarah's death, but in retrospect, having completed the game, this doesn't even get seen to completion because at the end, the writers actually missed something huge. And it is huge, because Noel and Sarah were dual protagonists for an entire game, but they have literally no dialogue at the end. When everyone reunites, none. It seems like the most normal and natural thing would be to have everyone having little bits of dialogue with each other, so they could, I don't know, capitalize on the character dynamics in 13 and 13.2. But it's mainly just Lightning and Sarah, and then Noel talks with Caius and Yeul. And I guess Snow shouts Sarah for the 10,000th time. The final dungeon, with just Lightning, could have included a few people for each area. Maybe for one area we get Vanille and Sazh, or Vanille and Fang, and then Snow. Never mind. I'm fantasy booking again. Final Fantasy Mania is never going to happen. Noel at least wanders the streets of Luxerion and reminds you that he exists outside of your immediate surroundings and outside of the quest that he is unique to. But I guess his closure and journey's end are quite nice. He gets to reunite with Yeul in the end. I think it's her. One of the Yuls, one of the million Yuls, and he moves on to the new world with her. Assuming he didn't accidentally pick up one of the other Yuls by mistake, and his whole thing in 13.2 was to save her, so this is nice to see. Other than that, my sentiments on him are similar to that of my issues with how Sarah was handled, for instance, and that you have a character who acted as a protagonist in the last game, who's now just a story beat. But it bugs me less with Noel, even if only because I was less attached to him. Not that he's a bad character in 13.2. That said, it sucks to have to defend his writing in 13.2, only to then see what he's become, because the likelihood is that if sales figures are anything to go by, most people aren't even aware of what became of his character in this brave new post 13.2 world. So it's all good. Chest bump finger flick, innit? Let's quickly talk about the 500-year time skip. That's how long it's been since Final Fantasy 13.2 ended. I think people would go a little crazy being alive for over 500 years. Now, while the writers do in some ways touch on the concept of life absent mortality, I don't think they do it nearly enough. Snow's the best representation of this kind of narrative storytelling because he's so stricken with grief and despair that he turns into a thief. You can really genuinely feel Snow's pain, but to be honest, even then it's not nearly as visceral as I would like. But to be even more honest, anything shy of absolute depravity and insanity wouldn't be realistic enough for me, so they got to keep it somewhat on the level. The charm of the 13 trilogy is in the warm, cozy moments and the likable characters, after all, so that'll hamstring you a bit if you want to get the benefits from it too, even when some of them are watered down like they are in this game. But with that, our schedule is now freed up to go save another friend in Snow, who's currently crying in the club in Yusnaan. Before that though, we do see Vanille. She's a saint now, and she can hear the cries of the dead in Valhalla from the chaos, and now she's holed up with the Order. She's not allowed to leave the cathedral, apparently for her own safety and protection. She has a new hat and woke up 13 years ago, meaning she spent so much time as Crystal Pepsi that it's almost unfathomable now. I've got a character analysis lined up for her later, wherein I'll dive a little deeper, but for now it's a short meeting. She's friendly with Lumina, and she says that Fang left while Vanille stayed behind with the Order. The cathedral is filled with chaos and the aforementioned souls of the dead, and Vanille sounds understandably depressed in her demeanour. She feels a sense of duty, and there's nothing we can do to help her for now, but we will be back. The soundtrack does not in any way navigate away from its place among the series' most wonderful features, because the music, given the timekeeping nature of the overall experience, actually evolves during the course of a day, and this leads to a strange but rewarding phenomenon, wherein the soundtrack itself feels like a sentient, living and breathing entity, with as much agency as you, the player, moving with you and pushing you along gently. It's like the time mechanic in that it's the idiosyncratic party member that only your subconscious mind sees, aka the constant within the ever-changing nature of the experience, even within constant motion. Maybe it even has more autonomy than we do on account of not having to do side quests. Lucky thing. Either way, I think it's this symbiosis that helps any player to develop a sense of connection with the soundtrack. Well, that, and it's just really pretty too. It's pretty to listen to. The music tells its own story by escaping causality just a little bit here and there, and with it, Lightning Returns sort of remembers that it's part of a trilogy. It does that sometimes. It actually remembers that it is part of a free game trilogy, and as such has a duty to provide callbacks to it. But it also seeks to find other ways to conclude the thing with a level of closure commensurate with the amount of time and energy that any remaining fans of the subseries have put into it on their end. Music is thing one. It's similar enough to the prior games, but with a dark twist. 13 was mainly innocent, 13.2 was ethereal and pretty, 13.3 is ethereal, pretty, and twisted. It's perfect for this game's mechanical and clockwork aesthetic, and I still love naming aesthetics in games, so Lightning Returns will be given the tagline, Clockwork Depression. Maybe the title would have been Clockwork Evolution. Ironically, I think the most prominent feature that links any game in this trilogy is almost clockwork itself, and that would be the difficulty they have in relating to one another in the first place. But that's like saying the only constant is change. It isn't as a paradoxical weapon and a philosophical shield, and it doesn't amount to much unless you're a cringy poetic twat like the one you are listening to. First would be the evil savior, shades of Metal Gear Solid 1 actually. It plays as lightning arrives in Luxerion and sets the tone real quick. It's a sad song for sure, and it sums up nighttime Luxerion perfectly, namely the outer areas that most people avoid. It stops itself momentarily about 2 minutes in with a rhythmic chiming that's quite orderly and mechanical. And I wonder if they knew to do that when composing it on account of the game's emphasis on time and how ever-present it is. It's a ubiquitous thing, this focus on it, and I've always had a great deal of difficulty pinpointing a game's themes because I'm always so esoteric in what I personally take from games, and that'll happen on account of the subjective entailments of any piece of music. But a concrete thing that I've noticed with this game is time, both in life and death, and also the frozen time at the space between 13.2 and Lightning Returns, leading to a new lack of life and death in general. So there's nothing really new about anything really. Decay is another prominent feature, and I can feel it here too. These kind of tracks can bring you down, but they also help to allow the brighter and more comforting tracks to flourish when they get their chance to show themselves. But I feel as though, much in the same way that Nova Chrysalia, Luxerion and Ouroboros Festival convey the brighter themes of hope and comfort in a dying world, this one, and the others like it, I guess by extension, certainly convey the other side of such a dark, grim world. Innocent song for a sometimes innocent place, but only sometimes. As a starting area, Luxerion is very bright and welcoming, less so in terms of its chessboard colour palette, but more so in its structure and music, and herein lies an auditory way to convey as much. Some games like to kick you in the teeth with the opening main hub, I guess, for games. Some like to start out slow and build up steady. Meanwhile, Luxerion's theme lulls you in into a sometimes genuine and other times deceptive sense of calm and uneasy peacefulness. It's the quintessential music for more positive thoughts and ideas, the kind that stimulate your desire to engage in adventure and exploration. And considering how dark this soundtrack and this game can get at times, it's nice that they didn't front load it all at the start. They save the more uneasy, twisted songs often most for the nighttime, so the daytime as a result feels almost untouched by the decaying world and the abandoned concept of time that may have stopped the characters aging but hovers over you always. Luxerion says all of this much more eloquently than I ever could, with its lovely strings and its isolated certain pieces of music at certain times of day, while doing the same for certain areas only to add to their uniqueness. It's good to have music that only plays at a certain time of day. What's better for the holistic design of a creative thing seems to always be better when isolated too. Learned that when Final Fantasy 15 soundtrack started playing, and I was writing on that during episode prompto, and I think it carries weight here too. It's a great first song for touching down in the place. Reverent Souls is an 8-minute masterpiece that builds and builds, adding more and more as it goes along, and still won't ever feel long enough. For a game that hangs time over you as this almost god-like entity that's even more imposing than like Boona Velza, and one that you'll forever be at the whim of. It really is the big baddie, isn't it? It's the big superpower, and this is a song that separates itself from the player as an entity that doesn't give a damn about time. So I find it ironic. It's very powerful in that sense. To hear it fully, you'll probably have to hear it outside of the game, since the chances are that you won't play it in full on account of the fact that you're always moving somewhere, whether spatial or temporal, daytime, nighttime, city, town, one quest to another, always moving. But this one doesn't care, doesn't give a shit. In that vein, you may not have a chance to appreciate fully how pretty it is until the second playthrough, or YouTube, like most of us. Plays in the afternoon, feels hopeful, despite how shit things are. Love songs like this. Now that I think about it, Luxerion really did get some of the most beautiful and pensive pieces. It plays in the evening, Sunset Prism. The time of day dictates the song you'll get, as we mentioned, so that's why the morning gets the Luxerion theme, for instance. and again it's special. It's similar to Reverent Souls, this one though, in that it's pensive but not necessarily dark. In that sense, it's sort of like an unofficial theme for Lightning, at least to me. It's got that piano in it. It's another longer track, clocking in at over 6 real-life minutes, which in Lightning Returns is about 5,000 years. Luxerion musically, they're really happy and hopeful in the morning, progressively turns much more solemn and dark very gradually as the day goes on, and this song sits neatly between those two distinct musical archetypes in that sort of liminal space between them, bordering those thresholds. Never really goes off the precipice though. It's very contained, it's very controlled, and I really do think it might sound kind of crazy, but I think it's genius how the music of this game was implemented into it, and it might be the one truly decent use of the time mechanic that actually adds something to the experience that I can look at and feel some semblance of positivity about. Because other than that, I don't tend to like time mechanics at all. This game may have missed a lot of opportunities to harken back to FF13 in particular, but finally it remembers its existence and reminds us of it with Crimson Blitz, which somehow is only my second favourite battle theme. It's the battle theme for Luxerion, and it's as much an arrangement of Blinded by Light as it is its own track. Usually battle themes are whatever burgers to me, and while the view counts for those on YouTube hit the millions, you'll catch me in the song with a couple thousand views and like 2 comments just digging an ambient piece. But this game does battle themes just right. It's the chorus from Lightning's battle theme with added vocals and some unique little twists, and I remember how I mentioned in the 13.2 video that the inclusion of Fabula Nova Chrysalia, the song, during a certain moment in Ubodum, was the strongest connection that game had to 13. But this is probably an even cooler way to do it, taking an established idea and tweaking it slightly. Similar and different, nostalgic and new. Clever stuff. It's just really catchy, makes you feel alive. Ah yes, there is no victory fanfare in this game. Modern Final Fantasy only really uses it for fan service outside of battle, but this one does a really nice job in celebrating victories. To be honest, it's kind of jarring if it fades out and the music goes back to Sunset Prism or something, but it's a great respite from the otherwise dulcet tones. I'll contend that it sounds like it belongs in 13.2 or Pulse in Final Fantasy 13, but whatever, it sounds good and I like it. I'm always waiting for this to play. The Warrens, that modulated synthesizer about 20 seconds in is deadly, man. If you listen closely, you'll notice that it quite possibly resembles a warped choir in the distance. And I think that's pretty in keeping with Luxerion's thematic constructs. The piano is dissonant and frenetic, which is a Master Shi trademark, but that's just what's happening on the surface, and it's not crazy enough to send a song into the shadow realm completely. The distorted guitar is evil and it's dirty, but also somewhat understated in a way that shouldn't make as much sense as it does. I mean, it's buried in the mix and it doesn't merge very much at all, but that's for the good of the song. The violin bends so much that it sounds like it's in pain, and then that moment comes in at about 2 minutes and 20 seconds, wherein it just doesn't let you run away anymore, and it drags you under completely. Just as gravity drags you down into the Warren as you play the game. And since it plays in one of the creepiest, saddest places in the game, that being the Warrens themselves, which seem to be the slums, it kind of speaks to how Luxerion starts so hopeful in the morning and then dies by midnight as the Warrens open up and you begin your descent down there, chasing the shadow. If the brighter tracks are emblematic of the hopefulness of a new beginning that only the ending could bring, felt most keenly during the daytime, and when the night falls, then this track is the 3 AM come down after a euphoric high and a monument to the absolute existential dread that follows. Fun. Noel's theme, Shadowhunter. Even though Noel's place in this story as a dumbass cosplayer trying to be some cool Shadowhunter only to get bested by lightning does hurt him tremendously. This theme, which seems an arrangement of his original theme but with more eerie and present synthesizers and some, is the glue that keeps him from going completely into the kind of territory that the writers dragged Snow into back during 13.2. Such is the power in music, I suppose that's why I talk about it so much. I honestly prefer this version to his original. It's a wonderful song, and it's weird that despite playing 13.2, assuming you did, the player and the character now have hundreds of years of separation between them. It hurts the characters and it hurts the game a lot because that player to character connection is severed almost completely as a result. But once again, the music of the trilogy arrives in like an audio ambulance to patch up the wounds that the game is suffering from and kind of saves Noel with his theme. The final song I want to cover from Luxerion is called Angel's Tears, and that is a mellotron. It's so distinct. Once you hear it more than once, the sound just locks into your brain. It's locked in. I've got an effects pedal that makes that sound. It's an eerie but also energetic synthesizer that's really present in any mix. I mean, it's the first thing you'll notice when it's playing. It was developed in the 1960s, and if you listen to a lot of progressive rock, what we call it prog rock, from like the 70s, you become really attuned to the sound. It's an electronic keyboard of sorts that was used in the Final Fantasy X soundtrack as well, in a song called Calm Before the Storm. I don't know why Mellotron was the name given to it, but I do know that everything it touches sounds melancholy, so maybe that's why. But this is a standout track in that not only is it unique to the Angel Tears side quest, it also uses that instrument for the first and only time in the game, and only the second time ever in the Final Fantasy series that I can think of. Any soundtrack ballsy enough to use a mellotron is a glorious one. Fantastic track, reminiscent of an old radio. And I really do hate that it had to be put into this game sometimes, given its issues, but I also appreciate that it was, because it fits this one in a way that 13 and 13.2 just can't touch. This for me is Luxerion's real main theme. You know, in my head canon, it just fits that sad but hopeful vibe, just nostalgia. And that is the music of Luxerion. The music and locations really are holding this game together, given the shaky start, and they will be the glue that keeps it that way through the entire thing. I really did mean it when I said that the music might be the true protagonist of Lightning Returns.
You always loved this song. I remember when you told me what it was about, that you had to believe in tomorrow, no matter how bleak the future seemed to be. Keeping hope alive gave you the strength to make tomorrow a better place. I can see you now like it was yesterday, humming the song softly to yourself. Tell me, Sarah, can you hear it now? Are you somewhere close watching me remember you?
Yusnaan. Dying society, dying world, close to the end. No better time to party. Burn out as bright as you can, prove you exist. Love this place, really do. It's almost nocturnal, since by day it's alive and warm and welcoming, and then by night it really comes alive. It's alright during the day, if not somewhat asleep, but that's part of its charm. That's only relative to the nighttime anyway. Ouroboros Festival is the second best song on the soundtrack for me, right after Nova Chrysalia, and it tends to play as you're traversing the city in the nighttime. And it's the most vibrant and colourful area, both in terms of the physical, and the soul. Nothing brighter than a dying world. No bigger party either, at the centre of the city with all the NPCs doing all of these unique things with the stalls and the play and the fireworks, the restaurants, all the way to the outer edges of the place where it's nice and quiet and more shady stuff goes down. The whole place is alive with spirit, and it feels like one of the most compelling and addictive areas in any game that I played, probably in my life. This one's funny, the data log entry is a fucking Epicurean's dream. The place is self-indulgence personified. You know, it is the end of the world, so it's cool. The entry itself even states, standing opposite to Luxerion in all ways is Yusnaan, capital of hedonism and revelry, which draws pleasure seekers looking to enjoy what little time remains to them. And it really does live up to it. They got a coliseum, a square filled with posh restaurants, it's filled with posh twats too. Of course, with any cool city, you get the undercity and the outskirts where the shady stuff goes down. I'm surprised not everyone is living here, given that it's about the only place in the world where monsters don't roam out the streets and actually have the sensibility to stick to the outskirts of the city. I guess some people value actually being able to sleep. As patron, Snow is the one in charge of all of this. This is Nova Chrysalia's party hub, sure, but it's also its main source of food. It's nice that they put thought into the world building like this, especially considering that it's a dying world. And things like food will be scarce, and people will always inevitably end up eating monsters and stuff, if not, so hooray for Yusnaan. At the Coliseum, you'll initially be tasked with winning just a few battles, but you're free to return here at certain points in time, and a time in which you visit will dictate which enemies await you there. It's a fun place to return to. The Grand Palace is a fun place to visit too, but outside of the main story, there's no real reason to. Unless of course I'm forgetting something. I'm not, but mainly I just like how the light scatters near the train station in the late afternoon. For a city filled with hedonistic Epicureans, Yusnaan really is a wonderful place. I had a feeling there was some Middle Eastern influence in this place. According to the wiki I was right on the money, but also with hints of Renaissance inspired themes. Yusnaan does stand out as a city that's full of life in a dying world, and you'd be forgiven for forgetting that within just a few miles at any point in time, the Sea of Chaos crashes ever closer to the shore in this shrinking, dying little world. At this point, it's pretty much just a little island. My favourite spot though, weird though it is right here atop the Glutton's Quarter, wherein you can spot this right now. I believe it's the Ark in the sky. In the daytime, it's a really nice sight to look at. The Yusnaan quest revolves around saving Snow, who's holed up in his palace. Apparently Lightning's too shy to just barge her way in, and honestly it'd deprive us of one of the more fun quests in the game, in fact the most fun of all of the main quests. The idea here is to talk to people to get info on how to get into Snow's Augur's Quarter. So again, the game doesn't hold your hand, and I dig that. What I dig even more than that is that the charm of the 13 series has finally returned. We've got to get some fireworks for reasons that I don't remember at the time, but later will, since it turns out they're for the next stage of the quest. We also get this every time.
I don't have a choice, do I? Meow, meow, choco, chow.
That was adorable. Magic words?
Meow meow choco chow.
I'm getting the feeling you're not as amused as I am by this whole thing.
That was by far the most embarrassing thing I've ever done in my life.
What are the magic words?
Meow meow choco chow.
Quite the achievement.
What? Is something amusing you?
A shady dude, just almost as colourfully as us, offers us a spot on his tour to get into the back entrance for some money. 2,000 gil is nothing, really, even on the first playthrough. Problem is, the ticket says we've got to be at the industrial area by 6 PM. It's nearly 7. Tomorrow it is. We're going back to Luxerion at midnight anyway. I only mention this because it's a good example of how even the main quests can occasionally step on each other's toes in a way that's kind of annoying. Although it does kind of lend itself to doing things in a less than linear way. Despite having many more moving parts in 13.2, it feels like less of a fustercluck, you know? Yeah, I'm trying to swear less. I'm not monetized, I just like a challenge. Sometimes. Arrive earlier than 6 PM on any given day and it'll let you fast forward time without going to an inn. This is a good time to point out that while that does seem antithetical to the game, sometimes it is totally fine to just accelerate the clock. At this point we're at about 5 PM. We ain't making it anywhere on the train and getting back there in time, and teleporting somewhere else, then back, then all the way down here would cost about 5 EP for the 2 teleports and a potential chronostasis if we get caught up. And there aren't that many battles in Yusnaan other than the occasional flan and a guard. So we could just run around and beat things up, sure, but we did that in the wildlands by beating reavers for 4 EP and then exploring the place. With Yusnaan, your EP is best used for the EP exclusive item orbs. You have them all over the game, but there are quite a lot of them in Yusnaan. A good trick is to save the game, see what's inside, see if it was worth it, and then reload if it's crap. That said, what I like about this system is that this is all learned naturally. There's nothing in the data log that I could find anyway that indicates, encourages, or even points to this level of nuance. It's tactical use of time and a balancing act of perpetual micromanagement that, while not appealing to someone like me on paper, it does admittedly provide me with a sense of pride in figuring these things out. And you can only figure these things out by trying and failing. Trial and error, essentially. Literally, trial and error of the video game. They do respect the player's intelligence in many ways. Personally, I'd remove the time mechanic if I was given a chance to, but since it ain't going away and I don't have that power to turn back time, I'm totally fine just pointing out the good in what I consider bad. I know that good and bad are objective terms and I do occasionally slip and use them, but it's only fair that I apply the same level of nuance and fairness even to the most divisive gamer in a lot. At least I think it is. So yeah, I hate the time mechanic, but there's often a silver lining if you make the effort to genuinely master it, or maybe even just engage with it and tolerate it to the nth degree. So the death game, it's a gauntlet wherein enemies are thrown at you, while you navigate a narrow series of small rooms in Yusnaan's industrial area, which is surprisingly pretty. I can't really describe it. It shouldn't be pretty. I shouldn't find it pretty, but I'm weird and I do, if that makes sense. It's all for the purpose of getting into the Augur Squatter via the back entrance. The route there is a good test actually of how well you've acclimated to dealing with the mechanical monsters that can't just be brute force with physical attacks, and it gives a broader view of the scope of the city. And eventually Lumina shows up and tells us just how bad Snow's been doing. It's nothing we didn't know already, but it's a nice reminder of just how screwed up he is for narrative reasons. Also, she summons a monster because she's a little shitbean. It's Cyclops. And on the first playthrough I had trouble with him, but not now. He hates magic a lot. But pay attention to the 4 EP you've gotten. That's not 40p, that's 4 EP. Wait, what does E stand for again? Oh, I've forgotten again. Always remember that in any sequence such as this, you really can get away with using chronostasis almost indefinitely. A few battles and you'll probably have already recouped the EP you spent for it, leading to days worth of save time. Remembering it's there is difficult at first with the chronostasis thing, but eventually you'll become so annoyed at wasted time that it'll be drummed into you. That's how it went for me anyway. Once again, the time mechanic seems to know what it's doing. We grab an ID card and head through the gate, unlocking the most lively area of the city. It's full of life, and that's ironic because the game says that Snow might have become a thief. We're getting in either way, and after talking to some NPCs we learn that there's a play involving fireworks, and that is why we got some earlier. Now it's on us to go out and acquire the rest. We must topple the playset with said fireworks by causing an explosion, then jump into the palace.
Guess I've just gotta keep moving. Keep your eyes front. Right.
That's the spirit?
Oh wow, 13 reference. They remembered, for once. Funny thing is, due to the chronostasis usage, we make it to the director of the play by 6:30, but he doesn't actually activate until 7. Really shows you just how much time chronostasis can save you. I like this director, he's silly and weird. Lightning tricks him into thinking 3 times the fireworks would really cheer Snow up. World's ending anyway, this is a general idea, and I enjoy how brazenly this game has Lightning say these things. So get 10 fireworks. Well, not 10, but you can get up to 10. Some are via side quests, but they're easy enough. Also, speak to all 4 chocobo girls. One's hidden in a sort of alleyway type thing, but if you speak to all 4, you get the Mikote dress. It's a unique garb, and it has the magic slash, which hits enemies with physical and magic attack damage. And it even has a meta guard with a star on it, so I shoved D-Shell and D-Protect onto it and rename it from Planet Reed to Planet Catgirl Evolution.
Well, you got your hands on a rare garb. The Mikote are a legendary race sent to live in another realm.
So it's just some fairy tale? It's not my style.
I think it looked great on you. If I recall, the land they're said to inhabit in the legend is called Eorzea.
Eorzea, huh? Sounds nice enough. Maybe I'll get to see it someday if it exists.
It doesn't fit lightning at all, personality-wise, but Toriyama would approve. And it was right here, getting the fireworks and enjoying my new outfit, that I genuinely felt as though the flow of the game was at its peak point. I was genuinely enjoying the process for the first time, actually, in both playthroughs. The thing is, and I've alluded to this, I know, but it's worth reiterating, the relaxed nature is only due to the fact that it is New Game Plus. So I suppose one's sustained enjoyment of this game really could depend upon whether or not they like it enough to play it twice. Odd.
You'll just have to find a part to play in the finale.
What? No. I can't possibly.
It's not a question of can or can't.
Some things in life you just do. Right.
It's the Mikote dress. It makes us remember FF13. Yeah, she may be reserved, but she's still lightning. And maybe hope is still hope too. I really wish these moments weren't so sparse, but it's better than nothing. Sometimes it just feels like we've earned more than we got, but that's just personal preference.
Maybe. Who's going to replace her on such short notice?
You're looking at her.
There's one condition though. He wants us in a nice dress. We already have said dress from the first playthrough, and this is where we originally had to win a tournament to get it. So we already have the dress. The game, however, handles this lapse of causality by allowing you to completely skip the supposedly non-optional side quest to grab it, meaning we now have time to kill before 3 AM when the play starts, so I secretly go back to Luxerion to do other things that you'll never ever see. Okay, this is where I grab the Neil footage. Essays are difficult to plan when you don't steal people's footage without telling them and actually play it yourself. They take longer to make too, but they give you this kind of freedom. Anyway, the play.
I am the true savior. I was made to serve God. But if that God lies to me, then he dies!
Imagine if the front door was open the whole time. We're in! The dungeon to Snow it's a dungeon. It has enemies and items and some door switches that I don't think are actually complex enough to qualify as puzzles. What would I know? Either way, it looks fantastic, futuristic, but also bleak and barren. It really symbolises Snow's mental state in that it's a grand and imposing palace, but also rotting away all at the same time. Or maybe I look too deeply into things. Or maybe both. This main quest finale is probably the best of the game because it has a level of drama that the others don't really reach for me. Noel could have done so, had he not been written a little haphazardly, and the others have elements of this to them, but this one is a culmination of Snow and Light's relationship as almost siblings. This is one of the rare moments wherein Lightning Returns feels like it's part of a trilogy, and you can be convinced sometimes, especially now that it had a plan all along, but I'm not convinced they did. But they really salvaged this one after 13-2 dismantled a lot of what made Snow so likeable. Even in spite of his annoying traits. He's turning into a thief and keeping the chaos contained, but ultimately loses himself and loses hope all due to Sarah's death in 13-2. This is interesting because everything that made him terribly written in 13-2 is actually being used as a narrative tool to make him better written in 13-3, because he's blaming himself for Sarah's death. So that's a good little use of something bad in order to transmogrify it into something good, which definitely deserves praise, and it caught me off guard with how cleverly it was done. Lightning's vulnerable, Snow's been salvaged, it's great. The boss battle includes his weakness being fire because, I mean, they had to, didn't they? But now, a little on why this video is a little more story heavy on the analysis than the combat, and why combat got its own dedicated section and hasn't really been touched on all that much outside of that. It's New Game Plus and Easy Mode. As always, I paid my dues in the last playthrough, and honestly, even if I hadn't, I'm pro Easy Mode. I'm an easy mode apologist. I don't want to spend 5 to 10 extra hours reloading battles wherein the only discernible difference is that the enemies are more spongy. That's about it, you know? Just so I can be an entitled elitist and gain the validation of other miserable bastards I don't even like, or more importantly, respect. This gameplay is king stuff is about as vapid as the graphics are king stuff. And the truth is that everyone values what they want to value based on subjectivity. I value different things from different games. So does every one person. The combat of this game is actually really fun when you get a handle on it, but in this essay it's story, art direction, world, vibes, soundtrack, characters, exploration, discovery, thematic constructs, narrative direction. I'll still touch on combat to a degree, but I can't really add much other than I used my massive pool of 8 or 9 EP to beat the crap out of Stowe or whomever else with multiple overclocks followed up by an army of 1 because I can confidently expend every single EP point, knowing full well that I get 10 for beating Snow, despite the maximum being 8 and then 9 in a New Game Plus. And other than that, the use of parrying, exploiting weaknesses, being in the right position, and learning the enemy's attack patterns, they all apply to every single battle in the game that goes beyond the more cerebral fights wherein you just have to crush a little flying meatball looking thingy or a jelly bean looking thingy. So it's not that I don't like the combat, it's not that I don't think it deserves to be talked about, it's just that there's a natural limit to what I can say, and that's compounded by the fact that I'm playing on New Game Plus and on an easier difficulty to begin with. Video essays take a lot of time to make, and that's especially the case when you grab your own footage like I do. So there's no reason to protract that process further by playing on a harder difficulty just to win over some miserable gits who will see the easy mode and go, ugh, because they're miserable. Maybe they're miserable because they play every game like that. Either way, Snow is defeated and he goes like half Seif, but Lightning is able to talk him round by invoking the Sarah card. It's a really, really good scene. Eventually, he comes around and Lightning softens up on him. It's the kind of thing that would have been great in 13.2 or something, but it's great to see it either way. We earned this scene, those of us who stuck with the series, and it's probably the best payoff in the entire series from a character perspective, other than perhaps the final scene of the entire trilogy. They really used the trilogy's history to its full potential here, and it's a brilliant climax to a really exciting chapter. My favourite of the game, I think. Snow's on our side now, but it'll sit in this palace until the big finale, so I guess we'll just leave him here. Bye for now, Snow. Good to have you back. Well, it took Sarah dying, but Snow finally remembered his character arc from 13, before 13.2 ruined it almost completely, so to pay for some of his crimes, one of which was becoming a shit boyfriend, he's now single and apparently also the patron of Yusnaan. So like, basically the king of the place, but instead of lording over everyone, he mainly just sits in his palace and sulks because he's ill at sea again, and because he lost his fiancée. And I suppose he's had also about 500 years to dwell on all of this, while the world dies. It explains his change. You know what, I'm glad he did change. It is a shame that it took the end of the world and all that other stuff, but it is what it is. I like that the power never went to his head as well. You look at these nutjob cultists and Luxerion who manipulated Vanille, and you see how bad that much power can be with their Order of Salvation stuff. So he's still our guy, but just mopey now. At least until Lightning knocks some sense into him one last time, but with love instead of anger. It's a love punch. Our punches on FF13 were angry punches, and they did the job of waking him up. But Lightning Returns is all about that lightning love punch, because love is all you need. His weakness is fire, by the way. That never fails to make me laugh. Lightning Returns has an odd approach to Snow, which seems to be, and I know in certain terms, let's make Snow less chronically stupid than he was in 13, and see if we can save him as a character after brutally screwing up with him in 13.2. Overall, I think they managed it, but it was dicey at times. The main issue is that, much like most of the others, he doesn't appear nearly enough due to the structure. The structure of the game prohibits it, in fact. We have 4 locations and 5 main story quests before the big finale. A character, whether it's Snow, Fang, Sazh, Noel, etc., gets the spotlight pointed on him for a while. Then we either fight him or help them, leading to a climactic moment and a resolution. And then they're no longer needed until the finale. Noel runs around Luxerion hunting monsters, so he's sort of present, but only rarely and in a severely limited capacity. Vanille paces up and down that bloody church, so she ain't making waves in the story. Fang hangs out at her bandit camp, presumably, and does nothing, literally nothing interesting. Interesting enough to mention anyway. And likewise for Snow and Sazh in the places in which we find them. This is the Lightning Returns way. It's the Lightning show. And this hyperfixation on her may look good in a game case and in marketing material, but the best part about Lightning for me in FF13 was her interactions and her dynamics with her friends and family, which very much includes the Snows of the world. I think what bugs me though is that despite the idea of somehow saving Sarah being Snow's sole purpose for living and being, we've still not seen all that much of them together. 13 had a bit via flashbacks in the ending, but 13-2's idea of this was a mess, and he was emotionally dumb and distant, and now she's kind of dead and he's just brooding. At this point, Sarah has more interesting dynamics with Noel than she does Snow. A Light, who has no romantic interest at all, thank God, Toriyama wouldn't allow it, has more interesting dynamics with Snow than Sarah does. Personally, I just do without all of this romantic bollocks, but there's probably a few arguments to be made, admittedly, that these connections are more powerful than the ones they want us to believe in. Romance in video games, it's just one of those things where I'm thinking, either do it right or don't waste my time with it. Don't waste anyone's time unless you're actually going to try with it and go all in. And even then, yeah. So Snow, as part of a relationship, at least gets his happy ending, like in 13, but for real this time. And Snow as his own character reverts back to the best version of himself, with a lot more experience from the end of 13, after having briefly forgotten left from right, up from down, and his head from his asshole. There wasn't much you could conceivably do with him post FF13 anyway, so I think it works out. His overall journey from naive, overcompensating idiot to wiser and more thoughtful idiot, then back to the idiot we knew, and now back to the more mature idiot, was a wild ride indeed. And that's Snow. He was annoying but wholesome, then simply annoying, and now he's annoying and wholesome again. Full circle. Just turns out the circle's double the size it needed to be. Farewell, hero. Nice knowing you. Best song in the game. It actually plays in Luxerion in certain areas only. Maybe even the best song in a video game ever, actually. I don't know. Immediately it hits me with a sense of peace. It only appears rarely, but that makes it more special. If Hamazu wasn't working on this series, I think I genuinely could have gone either way with the trilogy. And here we have a song that embodies that perfectly. You'd assume there'd be a sense of doom in a world slated for deletion, like Nova Chrysalia, but this track of the same name isn't some doom and gloom song or some crazy orchestral piece. Just a song with some keys, some strings, a few vocals, a subtle little synthesizer, and not much else outside of some indistinct mechanical sounds that seem sort of analogous to Lightning's almost clockwork new personality and the clockwork nature of the game itself, since we are a slave to time as well. This song has loads of room to breathe, I guess, and loads of gaps that you can let your thoughts naturally slip into and out of. It's like it's telling the story of the 13 trilogy itself with the language of music. There's something peaceful about it, with little glimmers of hope, accompanied by sadness and a longing for something that used to be, and rare little moments of confusion, and certain elements crossing over into one another, only to end up working out okay, even if it was turbulent. It's defiant to the vast majority of the rest of the soundtrack, just as we were to Fate in the first game. And I guess that's FF13's free game journey in a nutshell, and it makes me nostalgic, I guess. It's also interesting that Lightning just gets on with her new job, almost like an automaton. Even despite the eroding land and sea, we're built to get on with it, because that's all we can do. And this song doesn't so much punch you in the face with that, kind of like Ouroboros Festival, which itself seems a celebration of both life and death. Because Nova Chrysalia is a nicer, more comforting song that would rather headpat you with existential dread. Just headpat you with it, reminding you, isn't it, that everything's going to be okay and everything as it should be, and that every ending is just a beginning. Or maybe it's just a song that I like. Who knows? Ouroboros Festival. I think of this song, like I said, man, it's like a celebration of both life and death. And I stand by that. Beginnings, endings. A few years back, I was thinking about where the line is drawn between fear and excitement, because I was caught in between two emotions and unable to pinpoint the prevailing one. You ever have that happen? Mood swings, they're not always linear. Soon enough, I realised that it wasn't necessarily either one alone, but a potent mixture of the two hitting me at once. In the same sense, you could argue that abject, traumatizing fear and blinding, euphoric excitement are as much two sides of the single coin as they are two halves of the same side of that coin. If the end of the world isn't time for human inhibitions to go on vacation, then nothing is. And that, I think, is why this party atmosphere in Yusnaan captures Nova Chrysalia so well, and the spirit of the game. Sure, it travels from one emotionally resonant idea to the other, in that Nova Chrysalia, which plays during the daytime, often during train rides and downtime, captures equally the calm before and after the storm. But here, we have the other end of that psychological curveball. Look around Yusnaan and you'll see like smiles, you'll hear laughter, and witness a town full of people just getting on with it in spite of a world collapsing where no one's really aged for 500 years. And the trappings of existential mundanity should very much have consumed all of the fun in the atmosphere, yet it hasn't. And while I did initially question how exactly people could keep from losing their minds after staying alive for 500 years, or simply keeping from turning into emotionless, hollowed out husks, I now ponder as to the chronological positioning of the imminent apocalypse and wonder if it's perhaps because of the end of the world, bringing out this excitement that was able to nullify the 500 boring years of inertiatic stasis that preceded it, like a relief, I guess. Not everyone was lucky enough to sleep through it in a crystal Pepsi form like Lightning did. They had to live it. The Ouroboros Festival song is exclusive to Yusnaan, actually, and the nighttime. And if Yusnaan is the city of pleasure, as they call it, then this song is the soundtrack to it. Musically, the drums at the beginning sound archaic and indicate a return to its roots, perhaps symbolizing the reset of the world and the life cycle that's about to occur. Then you've got the warmer vocal tones. They enter into the mix and they add more of a human element, followed by dulcet, low, ambient drones that add as much uncertainty to the mix as they do stability. Ultimately, the song just keeps building and building, so you have what sounds like an acoustic guitar being played like it's an electric one, and every element of the song has come together in a way not too dissimilar to the way in which, I guess, the people of Yusnaan have come together for the festival itself. The mere thought of the end of the world is scary, but it's exciting shit too, isn't it? And this song captures that strange conflict of emotions really perfectly, in fact, that it still excites me enough to write myself into insomnia about it. This song is the only reason that Crimson Blitz isn't my favourite battle theme in the game. It's called High Voltage, and it just makes me feel alive, man. It's more Final Fantasy 13 2 than 13, but it's more Lightning Returns than either of them combined, because it's weird. One of the few rare instances of a positive factor regarding how disparate the games seem to be in relation to one another, whether through music, aesthetics, settings, themes, or even just characters, is that each game has its own distinct soundtrack that, while comparable to the others in an abstract way, manages to stand on its own all the same. That also means that mixing together any two songs from any two of the three soundtracks is as exciting as alchemy in like Atelier. Anything could happen. All in all, this one's hectic. It's electronic and it sounds like Pendulum made an experimental album about anime. If this was Atelier and we were synthesizing songs, this track is the experimentation of 13.2 and the batshit haphazardness of Lightning Returns, with all the good and the bad that implies. So a pie, basically, it's a musical pie. Nice to hear some heavier electronic guitars. Sounds like something out of an 80s action movie. It plays during the challenge of the same name in the outskirts of the city and makes the area feel like this lawless, chaotic city all its own. That's for the excitement of the death game, for sure. Just feels fun, like a reminder from the game to loosen up. Granted, that's astronomically difficult to do when that sodding clock has eyes on me perpetually, even when I want to chill. But in New Game Plus, it's easier to lay back and squish some monsters to a groovy 80s jam. This one's just sort of good at first, but at about 2 minutes and 8 seconds in, it goes full Final Fantasy. I'll have to make sure that that's the part that you hear, but there's this moment in a certain song so they'll just take off with something completely outside the realm of what the song has given you up until that moment. That's what keeps music fun. It's a nice break in a hectic, upbeat and aggressive song, but it's so good that it's what makes the song for me. Oh, Snow's theme. It's really evolved over the years, even if it's actually true that Snow evolved and then de-evolved while heading backwards only to now evolve once more. I guess with this newfound maturity, I like that his theme is less rambunctious. Fuck me, I managed to use the word rambunctious in an essay. Well, this one's more subtle and mature, just as he is now. I still haven't forgiven the writers for screwing up everything good about him in 13.2, but it's a start. Acoustic guitar, piano, it's all you need sometimes to make a point. I found an analogy that maybe works. Snow doesn't need to overcompensate anymore, and neither does his theme song, and that's why I love the bare bones nature of this new and final theme. I'm sure to have let it play for a while when we saved Snow, so I'll sum it up by saying that it is naive and hopeful, reminiscent of that feeling that you got in FF13, which very much was the most present in Snow himself, that vibe. So I find it fitting that he'd get this theme, despite his first one being very heavy with all the guitars. It's a nice full circle moment. So I guess the natural world isn't completely dead, Actual green things do still exist in Nova Crossalia. The world is an entropic chasm, and so the wildlands are the perfect medicine for that cold, hard street floor in Luxerion, or the man-made heat of yusnaan and the natural heat of the mainly barren dead dunes, which will come later. It's a very large area, but it might not be as large as it seems. What does it mean? Well, there's just a lot of nothing. But there are things. I think it's more in the way that they're spaced out. It's kind of like Final Fantasy 15. But that's how the natural world is in real life as well. What's most interesting to me in this area is the ruins of Academia. It lives on mainly in the grass and the properties of the natural world that somehow survived this long out here in the wildlands. I didn't even notice that that was what it was until the City of Academia theme started playing with the guitar and its chorus effect made itself known to me. Oh shit, that's Academia. Where's the Academy then? Which half of a building is it? It's not an exact replica of anything particularly specific, just some buildings, and that's about it, unfortunately. Reason being, when Valhalla merged with Pulse, it looks like just about everything got jumbled up and mixed together into a literal mass of mess. So what we have here is a brand new world with only tiny little elements of the worlds that we knew before. That said, Hope explicitly states that this was once a great city, or something along those lines, stating as plainly as possible for the player that we are in the remains of the City of Academia, 500 whole years after the chaos merged with it at the end of 13.2. So this is all we have left of the last two games. Well, 13.2. Cocoon's dead. He was literally destroyed when the crystal pillar came down at the end of 13. Kind of sad when you think about it, no traces of Cocoon remain. And when the world of Nova Crossalia ends, the same will happen to any remnants of Pulse that remain here, like these little pieces of Academia, and also to this new world we explore in the game too. It's really good environmental storytelling, I'll give it that. This kind of thing I'd have mentioned if they had missed the chance to do it, so I'm really impressed that they gave it that gravity. It's like they respect the world. Honestly, there's like a peacefulness. There's grassy areas of the place, but it's not entirely devoid of danger. In fact, it's quite the opposite. There are some really difficult battles here. You've got the northern reaches of the map, which are more like the dead dunes than anything else. And that's where you find the ruins of Academia that I mentioned. If they didn't explicitly state it, I'd have just not really known, because it seems like when Valhalla and Pulse merged, everything just got kind of thrown into a space blender, or a chaos blender, and just spat back out into the world that we're inhabiting now. But apparently there is some order to it. Self-organizational properties of chaos. I wonder if I like... Never mind, that doesn't matter. Still, odd to think that the only remnants of the old world were the hyper-futuristic Academia 500 AF, and that, of all places to stick it, was the most natural location of the game so far. And by far, low-key kind of genius, I guess. The temple in the mountains was fantastic from the outside. Unfortunately annoying from within, although putting the mystical temple of Etro in the most wild location of the game is kind of genius as well, because considering Etro's fate at the end of 13.2, I guess I'd explain it by saying that it adds to the mystery of the place and of this dead goddess, because it feels so far removed from anything else in the game, almost like a living ghost or a monument to what was. Seems like an anachronism in a series that's been known for time travel, so that's kind of impressive. So the Wildlands, I guess, while peaceful and tranquil, are also the last vestiges of the old world of Pulse, merged with the chaos of Valhalla. What's funnier is that, and I never would have guessed this, it's mainly based on real-world Costa Rica. The Wildlands main quest is sort of a three-parter, in a way, and the first is related to Caius and Yeul, which involves saving a white chocobo. He's been attacked by this big chocobo eater thingy, and so we murk him royally with army of one, because why not be stylish? We are a goddess, after all. We're role-playing. As Dr. Gizal, I can't believe they call him Dr. Gizal, as he performs chocobo surgery on the chocobody, Lightning ruminates on how she remembers fighting with the chocobo before, and earlier mentioned that she felt a familiarity with the giant chicken. So the wounds have been closed, but Chocobody's too proud to eat, so we won't heal. They do call him the Angel of Valhalla, so he's got a lot of pride. Thankfully, he recognizes us as his master and accepts Gizzle greens from us. So it's on us to gather those greens and other stuff to level up our Chocobody's life force. We can also name him, so I come up with something very appropriate and dignified. The rest of the ingredients to heal him fully and unlock all of his abilities as your faithful chicken steed are unlocked via side quests. Eventually, after some exploring and fetch questing, Super Wank is ready to go. He'll help us to access the other areas of the Wildlands, and more specifically help us access the temple wherein the main quest needs us to be. For this, we need simply learn the Glide ability. It also unlocks many other areas, so exploration is given another dimension, which is good game design. I like this game design a lot, for someone who doesn't like it. Caius awaits us at the temple, as does Yeul, and it's nice to visit the place from the beginning of 13.2 and Valhalla. It's still very mysterious, but now we get to see what it looks like inside. I like that while most other things didn't make it to this world in one piece, this world of Nova Chrysalia, this thing is completely as it was before. Gives it even more uniqueness and distinction, especially in a world with such distinct landmarks already. It also adds to the foreboding nature of the place and indicates an otherworldly power, which this place certainly does possess in great quantities. So Caius doesn't want our saving. This place is a graveyard for the living dead. He shoots a chaos beam at us and we fall all the way to the bottom. Now, the Temple of Etro is a shrine to chaos and Caius is here, so that means really cool music, but also we lose our powers here, according to Lumina. Now, originally, I wondered what that actually meant myself, and I worried that they'd take chronostasis away from me, but it just means that your HP is constantly sapped at by the chaos. Everything else seems as normal as ever. Speaking of normal, it's only on normal mode that you'll actually be affected by it. Otherwise, on easy mode, your regeneration will far outweigh anything that you'll lose. So it's basically just a non-issue. Whether Lightning's doing this to get revenge on Caius or really wants to save his soul is unknown to us right now, but we have to make our way up this fairly simple but sort of lengthy dungeon, at least within the context of the rest of the game. It doesn't really have that many dungeons to begin with. The enemies are definitely tougher in here than they are outside. On both playthroughs I noticed that, even the normal looking ones are a bit of a challenge. At least until you figure them out, I mean. Yeul. Not sure which one. Not sure it even matters anymore. She brought us here. This yeul wants us to save Caius' soul. He wants to die, but he can't because he's bound to the chaos. Kinda serves him right for ending the world, but whatever. This yeul is cool because she summons levitating chessboard platforms for us to traverse the temple, so I hope this yeul doesn't die like the millions of others. This is Rice Krispie yeul. A little after this, another yeul helps us by making more platforms, but this yeul is a different yeul. This yeul is Cocoa Pops instead of Rice Krispies. Sugar Buff yeul shows up and Lumina tells the player that there's a yeul for every life. The same yeul, but all different, and that's why they contradict each other. Some want Caius to be saved, and some want Caius all to themselves. Millions of yeuls means millions of bowls of cereal, and I am full. This dungeon's very platform heavy, and you can actually fall all the way back down to the beginning at certain spots, so be wary of that, especially if you're on normal mode and your HP has been siphoned by the chaos, but there is no fall damage. I checked it. It takes about half an hour to get through this dungeon, I think, and the enemies are a definite step up, but by now you should have a good enough grasp of the battle system, no matter what playthrough you're on, to be able to get it all done in one go, at least to the point where you can face the boss. The boss is another story entirely. Golden Nugget yeul gives us a flashback. Yeul, as it happens, is the chaos of the unseen realm. It all grew from her needing Caius. Honestly, at this point, I kind of stopped caring about all this chaos stuff. We already know what happened because of it, and Yeul's never really been all that interesting to me on account of her monotone voice and her slow talking in the multiple versions of her. So it's like, oh yeah, okay, all good, but it is some good lore. Thankfully, it's the last yeul for now, and we make it to Caius. Yeah, he doesn't want to be saved, does he? He says that the yeul that asked us to save him is just one yeul, and he's right, there's always another contradicting it, or waiting to contradict it, so all we can do is fight him. Caius can summon Chaos Bahamut to wreck us royally. He can also heal, he can buff himself, and his attacks are absolutely devastating. I remember him being the most difficult by far on the first playthrough, and it was the case with this New Game Plus as well. If you ain't on New Game Plus, in fact, this is the difficulty spike that will test just how much you want to complete this game and how committed you are to it. No joke. It is no joke, man. As always, don't be stingy with your EP because you'll get 10 for defeating him, and the maximum amount is 8, followed by 9 in a New Game Plus. And it's for doing this quest that it becomes 9. Never feel bad about using an army of 1 either. It's there to be used. Personally, I'm not certain I'd be able to do this fight without it, but I probably got my ass kicked and died quite a few times. I'm sure someone's managed it, but yeah, even in a new game, I had to break up the recovery items for the first time. So the reason Caius can't die is because there's always a yeul wanting to grant him a rebirth via her chaos powers. And Caius here sounds really human, actually. Yeul won't let him go and he has to look after her. He's like, she needs looking after, and in Boonavell's new world, Yeul, Caius, they don't have a place. Nor does the chaos. The chaos is where Yeul and Caius belong, essentially. Multi-grain shape yeul wants to stay, and Lightning accepts that. You can't help those who don't want to be helped. That's a good lesson for life. But now we know that Lightning was dragged into Valhalla, and we know why, and the origin of the chaos. It's cool to know all of that. The real reason that Lightning was dragged into Valhalla is because Square Enix saw $signs, but this is a good narrative reason too. The 13.2 video isn't up yet. I'm wondering if people might take contention with me saying that was a retcon, but I'll stand by it. After leaving, one of the yeuls says hi. Not sure which one this is. It might have been Ready Breck yeul, but she shows us the true form of Super Wank. It's actually Odin. Yeah. The chocobo is Odin. This is as weird as it is funny and cool and kind of perfect in a weird way. Chocobodin! Really odd though, that this stoic, legendary figure is also a rambunctious chocobo who's cute and also sassy. I guess he had a personality in the horse, chicken, statue, Odin's done it all. So yeah, that's the Yeul and Caius thingy. A little tip from me to you. If you're the kind of person who's wondering, hey, can I go back to that boss fight area and talk to Caius? No, you can't. Don't worry about it. I'm not messing with you either, you genuinely can't. I spent a good 5 to 10 minutes falling my way back up there, only to find that they just block off the area with giant rocks. I was hoping they'd reward the player for taking the time to do that and see for themselves, or maybe you can examine it and Caius will go away. But it does make sense. Caius basically already told us to fuck off. The path between any one Final Fantasy XIII trilogy game to another is a precarious path indeed, and has ruined at least one aspect of just about every character up until now. But Caius is unique, and that he completely no-sells the ass sandwich that is the character writing of any 13 trilogy game after the first. He is very special. He's still a badass. He'll still do anything to save Yeul, whichever version of her is his, and he still has that Steel Panther look. Unfortunately, there isn't much more to add to his section because he hasn't really changed all that much, if at all. But I find his ending sad, even if he is chill with it. In the end, he'll sacrifice his own freedom and go live within the chaos of Valhalla in Yeul's stead, and leaves one of the 1 million billion Yeuls with Noel. It's actually the most selfless thing anyone in the trilogy has done at any point, and I'm genuinely convinced now that I've been totally and absolutely wrong every single time I've called Caius a villain. He is not a villain. He's just an antagonist to us. Dude's a damn hero. Not even an anti-hero, he's just a hero. And even though it's sad, he doesn't seem too bothered, and this is the coolest way to go out. I try to avoid delving too much into it, but the follow-up book, Final Fantasy XIII Reminiscence Tracer of Memories. Lol. It has a scene with Caius in it, shedding some light on his life in the unseen realm, which I can only imagine is catastrophically boring for him. But when the narrator and protagonist of this book believes themselves to be dead, she wakes up in the unseen realm herself and is encountered by Caius, who tells her that in her world, the new one that Lightning and company enter into at the end of the base game, humans decide their own fate. There's a Yeul there with him, but there's a Yeul everywhere, all the time, so whatever at this point, who cares, innit? The implication that I'm drawn to is that Caius seems content with his place in it all. But it does feel sad, knowing that he's now a dude who sees souls from the land of the living to the dead. It's cool, but the real life applications of such a life probably lead to crippling depression. It's like playing the same video game over and over, forever. But like a modern video game. Ugh. But he's Caius, so I'm sure he could find a way to join the new world and start a brand new band if he wanted to. He can even reunite with Steel Panther and call them the Unseen Realm. Caius is a top-notch addition to the cast, from his very first scene to his very last, and he remained immune to the bullshit character writing right up till the end. They protected his character to the final scene, and he will forever be remembered by me as the absolute best written character in the trilogy. I'm not kidding. The writers got this one right, at least. Caius is based as fuck. But let's throw Yeul in with him, because it's weird giving her her own character analysis when she doesn't really do much of anything. Yeul wasn't particularly interesting in 13.2, and at least she's consistent in that she hasn't really changed. She's still not overly interesting. There are still as many Yeuls as there are grains of sand on the beach, or grams of sugar in your kid's favourite healthy cereal. Nothing particularly new occurs with Yeul, as with Caius. It's more a continuation that will eventually be resolved at the end, wherein she reunites with Noel. Well, one of her does, and so I don't really care all that much about Yeul, because 99% of the time, I don't know to whom I am referring. To which Yeul? I don't know. I don't think I ever have. The commonality is that for a girl with about 1 billion versions of herself, none of them are particularly funny, or really all that interesting to talk about, but because of her woe is me, I have it so bad character arc. And she does have it rough, to be fair, no matter which version of her you're looking at. But the way I see it, if you can't make at least one of them interesting enough, out of about 1 million, Yeul exists. Good for her. And that's how you unlock this section. I don't believe it's mandatory to complete in the game. I'd guess not, since it doesn't show up in the main quest tab, but rather the side quest one, but it's all relative. We join our tiny marshmallow friends here in Moogle Village, whereupon they immediately recognize Lightning as the savior and attack her with Moogle love. There are mean monsters given in trouble, so we eradicate them quickly and effectively for our Moogle buddies.
Hey, easy there.
Oh, Savior, we've been waiting for you.
That ought to be a weight off their minds. You should let them know right away.
Mog, it really is you, isn't it?
Kupo! Lightning? What?
Hey, come back!
So Mog became the chief of the Moogies. Cool. Mog feels bad though, because Sarah died. So that's 3 people who feel awful about Sarah's death. Mog, Snow, Noel. Oh, Lightning too. We've got 4. Does anyone not blame themselves for it? How exactly Mog survived, I do not know, but he operates by different rules than humans and comes from a different place, and he's a marshmallow, and marshmallows never die. Lightning talks him round, and then this.
That's more like the old Mog. Don't give up. Things are going to get better.
And that's the Mog section. Very short, very simple, very Mog. No nonsense, just pure and fun, just like Mog. The greatest floaty pink poo of all time. Also not mandatory, but we save the lost Moogles around the village as well. And this is what happens when you do. So Mog didn't die. This is good. He was just holed up in a little Moogie village in the Wildlands forest, and this with the other little Moogies. He feels bad that he couldn't protect Sarah, and he's so likable, man. I love Mog. His absence is unironically felt in this game. Would have been nice to have him as a sidekick again, like in 13.2, but just for this area. Kind of like how you can only ride your chocobo in this area. You know, like with chocobodin. You could have had special items that only exist here, that only a moogle throw can reach. That would have been nice. Considering that little Mog was only really a sidekick, I appreciate the time that they gave him in this game. I was surprised, honestly. And it did also give us the best moment of the game. Mog's conclusion results in him parting with us, because he's not human, so he ascends up with the Eidolons. I really wish he could have joined us, but it's poetic in a way to have him return to his true home. Man, it hurts to see him go, doesn't it? It really highlights just how endearing this trilogy's characters can be, even with all the weird writing all over the place. The new mid-realm, I guess, the middle realm, where Caius and about 1 million Yeuls reside, is also where Mog ends up, so maybe it's not so grim after all. He won't be lonely at least. Maybe I'm imagining it wrong, but Mog ends up there, and helps the protagonist of the follow-up book back to her world. Mog seems happy during this, because Mog's happy all the time. Well, most of the time. I'll miss Mog as a character. I miss all these guys really, but Mog, I'm surprised because you think he'll just be a nothing character or a mascot, and he ends up having depth. And it's really cool that a little Moogle got such a fulfilling arc in the trilogy of games. After only showing up in the second, in fact. Alongside Caius, Mog was treated very well.
So cute. Bye-bye.
It's the Wildlands morning theme. The last surviving wilderness. And this place is what I imagine the dying world in 13.2 looked like before entropy made a wasteland out of it and took it over. As for that strange parallel to the dying world, all the more poignant because this place is set to become exactly that, exactly the same with the world ending. But in mornings, and only mornings, this theme song plays and it reminds you that even when things are uncertain and scary, not everything is uncertain and scary. And nice things do still exist. The sun will still come up again, and you'll probably be around to see it. It's kind of the vibe I get. I haven't a whole lot to say about it other than it fits the place like a glove, and it nicely complements the more natural world and keeps things less synthetic to sort of accompany that vibe. At least I imagine that's the idea, especially in contrast to the crazy music that we get in the man-made cities and towns. Sounds like a Disney movie before Disney movies became garbage. Yes. But my favourite song from the Wildlands area is for sure this one, named after the place. It plays in the afternoon, and it's a fully woken up Wildlands now. It sounds like someone stuck FF13 and FF12 in the oven together and just baked the big business. High fantasy sounds, you know, but not particularly extra. Yeah, that's it, not too extra. Just the right amount. Typically songs like this eventually go off the rails and add in such high-pitched frequencies that I literally cringe and want to pull out my ears, but this one isn't too oversaturated. It's nice when a composer is sure enough of themselves and confident enough in the impact and the charm of a piece to not add any more to it than they need to. Good music hates that, I think, because music is alive and has feeling, obviously. Sunset Path. Wait, no, this is my favourite Wildlands song. I think. Right now it is. That could change in a few minutes. It continues in the same vein as the other Wildlands song, in that it doesn't go crazy with the electronic or digital elements that have all of these sharp wavelengths and abrasive dissonant notes of all of the discord that those kind of things add into a music mix. Now instead it keeps it simple with more natural instruments, starting out with a clean and simple acoustic guitar first, and it says, I think, more about the Wildlands location than I ever could, not that that's ever stopped me from trying. In every other sense in the game, the nighttime tracks tend to bring about a level of danger and suspense, of dread and unease, but the Wildlands kind of does the opposite and gets more chill as it goes on, which I think is thematically perfect. Well, at least until dead of night, but even then there's a silliness to the nighttime theme that feels more mischievous than outright dark like the other places. It's like an auditory musical way of painting a picture of a place's innate vibe that speaks to how chill it is and how different the atmosphere and people are here. An analogy came to me actually at one point, and it was that the Wildlands is to Luxerion and Yusnaan as Pulse was to Cocoon. This track sums that up nicely, I think. It wouldn't be out of place in like a Tales or an Atelier game, I guess. I like that modern Final Fantasy dives into this electronic stuff too. In fact, it's one of my favourite aspects of the series' musical trajectory, I guess. Songs like this wouldn't be out of place in some of the series' earliest entries either, and they're an important part of keeping that ever-elusive Final Fantasy identity alive and well, whatever the hell that even means, even when it seems as much a moving entity as the world itself. Carefree existence. I wish I was a moogle sometimes. Only sometimes. Like, not all the time. They can't fight for shit. We even have to help them out from the scary monsters because they look like tasty marshmallows, I suppose. And if we don't help them, they get roasted over a fire or something. Seems so easy though. Even when monsters do turn up to eat you, the savior turns up to save you because you're a cute little floaty pink poo. And what a perfect song to encapsulate that emaciated sense of responsibility. I think of it as Mog's theme, but then the name becomes kind of ironic, doesn't it? A carefree existence, considering that Mog still feels awful and it represents the little guy's pure spirit in spite of that darkness, I think. At least that's how my weird brain chose to interpret it. Just seems like a Mog song. He's mysterious, but he's really charming too, very pure, even if he is technically a weapon. He's like a meal from Nier in that sense. It plays here as Lightning has a wall of grumpiness eroded and just smashed down by the Moogle Empire, the Council of Pink Poos. Sums up Moogles perfectly, doesn't it? They're chill, they're funny, and they're chill. So naturally they make for one of the most understated and peaceful songs in the game. Sazh and Daj, they've been really missed in the story for so long. The trilogy has actively suffered for the absence of these two, and the writers may have forsaken best boy Sazh and his little boy Daj, but the soundtrack did him justice, at least. To have this song and this scene in the game, which also encompasses such dark and sinister elements, all within the same world, space and story, seems like it shouldn't work, but that's just the power of the soundtrack and the power of best boy Sazh. Really nice song. I like deserts, and I know I say that a lot. I know there's very little to them technically, but any video game space is just literal space that's filled with things. That's all it is really, and subjective interpretation dictates how much enjoyment we get out of any particular world. It's for exactly this reason they're not exclusive to it. I'm a big fan of walking roads of limitless nothingness in games, because they're not really nothingness. It's how I gather the footage of the places that I talk about. Downtime in games is important, and this place encourages you to engage in that due to its size and the subsequent space between things of note. So you might look at it and think, oh, that's empty, that's crap, but it also provides a few things to collect, quite a few actually, loads of enemies to fight, and those enemies are actually thematically consistent with the setting, which adds a level of immersion. And even if it is punishable by like time, the thing that struck me the most about this place is how surprisingly vibrant it is. It's the bright desert sands, the searing sun and the blue skies above, and the way the two mix, I think. I forgot how bright and vibrant it was. I was really surprised. It was this morning when I went back there. It was here that I learned that the game pauses itself if you leave it idle for about 30 to 60 in-game minutes, because I wanted a panoramic shot with the sun behind Lightning, and then the Ark as well. That's how nice it looks. I realised it because of this place. It doesn't happen in the Ark though, because time is suspended there. I'll always have something to say about these kinds of places. I say that a game like this certainly benefits from an almost lawless area, when the only semblance of order comes from a group of bandits led by Fang, because a dying world seems like something that would bring out the best and the worst in people. Sand surfing remains one of my favourite pastimes, and you really can stretch it out and enjoy it, which maybe seems insignificant, but it's the little things, man. It's the little things. What does annoy me about this place is the encounter rate. The encounter rate is mad. It seems fairly spaced out in other areas, but here I couldn't get footage of Lightning walking anywhere for more than 5 to 10 seconds without being attacked by the wildlife. Works well in that it communicates how wild and dangerous the place is though, so it guess that's a positive there too. Video games aren't made for my weird video essays, are they? Back on the topic of the worst of things though, I do find that the worst isn't truly explored, and I don't think it would really fit such a trilogy, but this place carries, I guess, echoes of that. By taking a large cavernous space of nothingness, I throwed it in the ethereal and reverb-laced synthesizers that push you along with the music, which we'll get to in a bit. The inspiration for this fourth and final location was actually Cairo, so it's basically Egypt without the pyramids. Instead of that famous architecture though, we instead get the remains of Atomos and Titan. Titan appeared in 13 in the cutscene, and Atomos appeared in the game as the rolling ball thingy. I think I called him a roly poo or something. I made fun of him. I feel bad because he gave us a lift to the Sawyer Springs. The wiki states that the dead dunes are likely the remains of the Archilt steppe impulse, and while it does so without a citation or source, it does provide evidence by referencing the fast travel cactuar statuettes, alongside the more obvious Titan and Atomos, whose location was also confined to the steppe. Not that they couldn't move, but... So I may have just found the third step of the series. We had one in 13, we had another one in 13-2 that was very similar but kind of different, and now one that is literally a desert 500 years later. Potentially. All in all, I really grew to love the place, and there's probably third playthrough, but that's something that happens a lot now, that I actually take my time with games on account of these essays. Once again, it's difficult to enjoy all of these visual and sonic pieces all scattered throughout the place on first playthrough, but the game wants you playing it multiple times. Whether or not it earns that desire from you is another story entirely, that's unique to you, but this is just one of the many rewards of doing so if you do develop that bond with it and decide to come back. I've no real love for the long and winding nexus of underground dungeons from a gameplay standpoint because they're easy to get lost in, but I appreciate that they add a lot of extra space to the area and things to do if you're into more content, which most people are. So all in all, it's a great area. I don't know why I didn't see it sooner. Also, Village and Void from 13.2 plays by the giant head thingy. In fact, music from 13 and 13.2 appears all over, I think, every location at one point or another. It's just very specific in what triggers it. It's a time of day and a place in synchronicity, so it's quite specific. And that's all alongside the brand new music, so there's a good conduit between this otherwise quite detached experience called Lightning Returns and the games that shaped it. And I don't think I really realised that until I heard these songs. After a little trial, wherein we do a little thingy to a stone monument and beat up the local wildlife and get rid of a sandstorm, we're accepted into the bandit clan Monoculus, led by Fang in the Dead Dunes, who finally appears right now. This is done well. Two aren't overly sappy about it, but you can tell they're really happy to see each other in their special way, I guess. And we have an excuse to have Fang travel with us and fight with us for a little while. To be entirely honest, I forgot guest party members were even a thing in this game. This is the only one I can think of. Fang debuffs enemies, much as she did in the 13 game as well, because she was a saboteur as well as a commando. At least as a default setting, eventually anyone can become anything, but if you're anything like me, it won't stop you from sabotaging them anyway, because it's a force of habit at this point. Fang knows about our mission, and she also knows that we're Magical Girl Lightning now, so we don't need to explain to her about the outfit or the hair. Fang left Vanille, even though they woke up together, because she's after the Holy Clavis. Sounds like a euphemism for something. The Order getting it would be bad because they're annoying. That means that even though we got to go dungeon diving, we get to hang out with Fang. So I can cope. Although that coping was put to the test, this dungeon has doors and they open and close on the hour, severely limiting your approach, but enough haphazard bumbling around and you too will find, eventually, the quest location that you seek. They also stick the cactuar statues that let you fast travel all over the place, so it's made it a lot easier. I just freeze time the first time round and pick the most linear path, heading down, and then we reach the door. Turns out though, that you've got to go out and visit 3 separate galleries elsewhere in the ruins and find the murals. That means the shrines. Because of course we do. Couldn't tell me that before. Padding. It's padding, it happens, it's a JRPG. Bhakti. It's Bhakti, guys. He talks now, apparently. He's very low on fuel. I don't think it's the Bhakti from 13, but we picked up loads of fuel just wandering the desert. We've got 5 out of 3.
My goodness. Everyone looks quite different than I seem to recall. Why have you become so thin? Did the many long years spent in this dry desert air absorb the moisture from your bodies?
When humans die, they never wake up again.
Never start up again? But we are finally reunited after so long. I rationed my fuel so carefully, all in an effort to witness the end of the world together with them, my dear friends. I had no idea that they needed constant refueling. They must have thought that I had abandoned them here.
I don't think they did. They would have known that you were doing everything you could to save them. I'm sure they were grateful for that.
I thank you. Humans are a kind species. I truly did love these human companions of mine. Farewell, my friends.
Bhakti, you were the best friend these people could have hoped for. The light of these souls. They're the proof of how grateful your friends were. Hope, what do you think this is? Can even a robot possess something like a soul?
I don't see how it could. A robot isn't made by...
Shut up, Hope, I saw it. It's nice, isn't it? The little Bhakti from, what was it, 500 years ago? Or was it 1,000? No, 500, probably. He settled down, he found himself a wife and carried on his family lineage. Upon getting to the mural, we're then told that we need tablets to activate them, which is really annoying, actually. Less so after a while, because if you've been exploring the desert already, then you'll likely have activated the cactuar statuettes. Or is it statues? Who cares? They're the free shrines, allowing you to warp straight there. I actually stumbled upon them while exploring when I was out gathering footage of the world, and Lightning will comment on them, but that's the extent of it. Personally, I think we should have been given the option to pick them up, but for some reason the game doesn't allow you to do this. This only further reinforces my theory that this section is the most padded of the lot. It's basically one big series of dungeons, the Dead Dunes story, but even then it's protracted in a way that feels less than natural. But we have Fang with us, so once again, I'll manage. That said, it is in these moments in JRPGs, I don't know about you, but for me, it's in these moments wherein you're 30 minutes into an hour-long dungeon, you're running back and forth, you're getting stuck, you're getting lost, you're trying to get through, an enemy ambushes you, and you just start to wonder why the hell you even play JRPGs to begin with. For me, I wonder why I do essays as well. I always remember that it's just par for the course of the genre. I mean, Japanese role-playing games, they don't tend to respect the player's time very much. But after seeing some other games lately, I found that even among the shorter JRPGs, padding is something that has plagued them for time immemorial, and I don't think it's ever going away. After getting the free tablets, we can now find and access the free murals. It's a spoiler video, so the idea is that the Order want to purify the souls of the dead using Vanille's soul song, but what it actually does is destroy all of those souls, meaning that they won't be reborn in the new world. I'll speak on this when discussing Vanille as a character in a bit, but the idea of Vanille being coerced into this due to her guilt never sat well with me. Couldn't really figure out why until I played it again. Her and Fang paid their dues by spending another 500 years in crystal stasis after already sacrificing themselves to save Cocoon at the end of 13, and helped Sarah even a great deal in 13-2 from within a dream. But it was real, Vanille said so herself, so I'm not sure what else they can do at this point. Due to this, Vanille's character writing feels a bit like a stretch. That's all, just a stretch. Like this is all they had to go with, so they just did it. It makes her seem kind of dumb, since she technically knows all of this, and Fang confirms that. And yeah, it's just a mess. We'll get on with that later, that's for later. At the clavis, Fang tells us that Vanille will die if she performs the song, and then she tries to destroy the thing, and the Order ambushes us, setting up Grendel as this quest's boss fight. I was half convinced it was going to be Fang for the fight the first time round, but it's nice that we don't have to fight her, like we had to fight Noel and Snow. They make off with the clavis, and they seal us inside. Lumina turns up, because she always turns up. She says that she tipped off the Order, but knowing her, she's probably lying. Or maybe she did, but secretly wants to bring us all together for the big ending. Who knows with this girl? Oh, Fang. I'm angry about Fang. I'm angry that she was wasted. Again. And I'm happy that she got more than a single cutscene this time. Conflicting emotions, that is this game's thing. Once again, she steals every scene she's in, just like Sazh, but once again I found myself sad and angry and indignant all at once at the fact that every character other than Lightning barely interacts with anyone but Lightning herself, outside of the big finish, anyway. I mentioned that already, but I'm mentioning it again because I'm double angry. She appears in the desert, and you get to hang around with her for a bit. She's her usual funny self, and she's cool and chill, and she don't take shit from no one, and then it's like, well, I guess that's it, I'll see you in the finale. The quest with her provides some fun moments and a chance to reminisce, and it's about the only thing stopping me from hating that terribly awkward dungeon, otherwise with the sections that are time dependent and whatnot. Her journey as a whole related very much to her atoning for her mistakes at the end of 13, and to that end there's not really much more that you can do with her beyond that. Her and Vanille put the crystal Pepsi pillar up to save Cocoon, they got them all out into Pulse, and I guess that's a problem they ran into perpetually with virtually every character, but you can still have her around. I'll probably say it a million more times, and I've said it a fair amount of times already, but a character can just be around and be cool and funny. They don't need to grow or undergo a fulfilling transformation or something elaborate, but still, barely any Fang. And a new arc, tacked on like so many others, involves saving Vanille, who's as conveniently dumb here as Snow is in 13.2, from the Order of Salvation. All turns out well in the end, and they both join the new world with the rest of us, all while largely ignoring everyone else in the scene. Fang would make a great protagonist in our own spin-off game, but ultimately we get what we're given, and Fang's story ends here with everyone else, as suddenly as everyone else's too. That said, the game and the story always benefit from having her in it, and she's one of the best in the entire series for me. Dragoons are just good characters, man, that's the rule. Aranea, Fang, you get the idea. Fang is really, really good. She didn't get what she deserved, but the game is better for her existence. Graveyard of Dreams. Considering that it only plays in a desert at night, I'm not surprised that it feels like a portal to Valhalla and back. In fact, in the Dead Dunes, you can actually see those green lines of what I imagine is chaos in the sea. You see them really, really clearly because it really stretches out. And desert means sitar. No matter what you do, you can't escape it. That's how media works. You can't escape the sitar in the desert. But they've done something brave and special here, the dev team, and that it leads to a song full of the calm of the very early morning, while also preserving that sense of foreboding and danger. I like that. And it's the danger that comes from being in a place so barren, I suppose, with more monsters than people around here. And so it's very thematically appropriate too. And in this desert of hostile enemies and mean bastards, it's important to remember. And it's simply nice to know that at least the soundtrack is still our friend and isn't trying to kill us. The rest of the songs here are really good, but I'd like to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the rest of the music in the game, starting with Lumina's theme. Now, other music not bound to a certain area includes this theme, which is much like Lumina herself. It's mysterious, but it's also funny and whimsical, just like the sneaky, cheeky little shitbean Lumina. Despite that, there's a familiarity in there. Crosshairs on that then, because, what is it, the 1:30 mark in the song? I know the soundtrack a little too well. It's a subtle foreshadowing of Lumina's true nature, which I'm really hoping I wrote down somewhere and will mention when it comes up in the story, because it's kind of mental how the lore works in this game and how genius it is and how also stupid it is. That's just this trilogy in a nutshell, isn't it? Lightning's theme, Radiance. Lightning's lightning, so she gets more themes than anyone else has words to say in this game. But I think I like this one even more than the unguarded future version of her theme in 13.2. There's some really good remixes of that on YouTube if you want to look it up. But this one has that melancholic build-up, and it carries with it the weight of Lightning's many complex emotions. And then at the end it has this amazing payoff that reaches its potential after 3 games worth of themes, as though every single theme of hers throughout every game was just leading up to that crescendo at the end. It's the only theme of hers outside of combat that does that, and waiting until the finale of the trilogy to do it is exceptionally intelligent. It's my favourite Lightning theme by far, even if no one else ever appreciates that they did that, I always will. Meeting You, strange song, man. It's an arrangement of the Ark's theme that plays as Hope bids Lightning farewell later. It's called Meeting You. I said that already. It's hard to appreciate when I'm wrestling internally with the reality of how much Hope got screwed in this trilogy, and mostly this game, but the scene's an honest one, and it caps off the relationship Lightning and Hope have really nicely. Lightning looked after Hope when he was really young as he looks right now, actually, ironically enough, and Hope tried to look after the world for Lightning while she was off in Valhalla fighting Caius in 13.2, and then some more while she was sleeping as Crystal Pepsi. So to me, it's the theme of Lightning and Hope. I've seen people discuss hints of romance between the two, but I don't really feel it. Every JRPG localization is in danger of someone taking liberties with it. It happens all the time, and changing the meaning of something entirely. So maybe there is hints of it. I wouldn't know. I won't know until I learn Japanese when I'm 170. But the little brother, big sister dynamic works fine with these two. It's a shame it took until now for it to all pay off like this, but this song helps a very mismanaged relationship reach a somewhat nice conclusion. They were sort of building to it over the game with little moments of humanity from Hope, little bits of banter. I feel like this is the payoff at the end of that. It's a nice song. Oh, great song this. Altar of Light is its name, and it signifies the increased urgency in the game as the end approaches. The synthetic beeping sound should be annoying, it really should, but it assimilates well enough with the rest of the track that I only really noticed it while thinking about the track as a whole, deciding what exactly was worth saying about it, if anything. For instance, not every track has been written about here in the essay. There are loads I won't cover. It's almost synchronous with the clock, this song, which is funny because it's on the final day, but the clock just stops working, or I guess the extra day, and you get as much time as you want to do whatever you want, provided you actually want to. Ironic, innit? I mean, ironic, isn't it? Boonavels' boss theme. It's straight on the list of one of my favourite boss themes of all time. They take the vocals from the Ark's theme and apply them to this heavy-ass, aggressive boss theme that literally starts with a bass drop. A loud one too, a bass drop. I wish people did them more. I remember they were in fashion about 10 years ago or something. Everyone loved a bass drop in the early to mid 2000s, didn't they? But I never stopped loving them. It's the final boss of the final act of the final game, and so they went appropriately hard into this one. To the point the song is the longest of the entire game, clocking in at just over 13 minutes. It's a monster of a song, worthy of the boss himself, who's literally the divine god of the entire series. This is the shithead who sees all of us as puppets on strings, tools to be used and discarded. So as a courtesy, the composers provide us with the music of the gods, as we destroy him completely. Holy, oh dude, I'm gonna make a slowed remix of this one. I wanna hear that bass drop slowly. And of course, the epilogue's little piece will cap it all off sweetly in the end. Begs and answers the question of how do you end a trilogy's soundtrack when you pass by every conceivable genre and instrument you can possibly use and made one of the most diverse bodies of music known to the world of gaming? Oh, the answer is acoustic guitar and some strings. That's all. That's all you need. Perfect ending. And that would finish the soundtrack critique analysis. Well, it's an excuse to play it and listen to it again. Yeah, that'll do. I've never dived into the soundtrack like this before in a video. I was hesitant at first, but this seemed like the one to do it with because every video is different. Some are long, some are less long, not short, much like this one. But of all the soundtracks I've listened to in my 72 years of life, this one carries with it a weight that I think demands this level of appreciation to go through my favourite songs individually, because few pieces of music have as much power in their subtlety as they do the more loud and incredible moments. And this time he even had help. So it really does earn its spot among the two other soundtracks in the trilogy. Doesn't feel at all out of place. It's different enough, it's similar enough, it's perfect. Honestly, when I think about it, it's actually a miracle that we got even one of these three incredible soundtracks, let alone three of them, all with the same level of passion and creativity and emotional resonance, without any drop in these aspects whatsoever between games, despite how insanely different all those games were. I can't say enough about how much I love the soundtracks of the 13 games, but I guess I'll have to for now. But once again, every time I've thought about things to love, even though I'm very critical of this game, there are a lot of things about it that I really, really love, and the first one that always comes to mind is the soundtrack, right next to the word. It's just so good, man. After saving Super Wank, the Wildlands Redux opens up as a main quest involving our boy Sazh. He's out in the northern area of the map, completely isolated in a downed aircraft, which is very fitting, at least. He's with Daj, but Daj is in like a crystal coma, a Pepsi coma. Lightning seems upset. Sazh is a hollow shell of himself, so it's on the savior, us, to find Daj's scattered soul fragments all over the world. The first is shown to us by this little chocobo chick. The last we already got, as in we ran into a cactuar with an afro in the desert earlier on when I was gathering desert footage, and then I killed him for the fragment. Well, I didn't know I was getting a fragment for it, but I figured I'd kill him anyway, which is very wholesome. The rest are as follows. In the Wildlands, Chocolina will give us a special Canvas of Prayers quest to retrieve an item in exchange for one. Makes sense, she is the chocobo chick in human and bird form. There's another in the Wildlands, and it involves retrieving something from Moogie Village, which is also very simple, and I apparently already had it. And the final one that we need involves winning at the slaughterhouse, which is always fun. You can also bump into Sazh in a few areas, including yusnaan.
Four? You already found 4 soul fragments? Then that means there's just one more to go.
And with that, we can head back and turn in Daj's soul thingy. After this, we need simply wait for the final day.
Could always figure out a way to smile and let Daj know it was okay. Yeah, it's something a father's gotta learn to do. I've been doing it all wrong, but that ends now. Daj, remember that game we used to play? Pilots, are you ready? This space race is gonna decide who's the fastest air jockey in all the Pulse. And blast off! Whoa, Chocobo and Airship are neck and neck. Who's gonna crack first? I'm Sazh Catroy, bringing you the race to the century, together with Supersonic Dodge. Hey, Dodge, you awake? Come on, Supersonic. You're gonna miss the race. Open your eyes. Your dad's here. Oops. Oh, hey. Are you okay? Huh? Ah, you're all right. Sorry about that. Guess I got too caught up in the space race. Again. Huh? Huh? Whoa. Dodge!
Dad, that's not fair.
Hey. Hey.
You can't play Space Race all on your own. That's our game. I want to play too.
Dodge.
Oh, Dad, you're always so clumsy.
I meant to do that.
Sazh was desperate to save his son, but that desperation nearly drove him mad. Dodge saw what was happening and got scared, so he hid his heart away. You could have all the best intentions in the world. Doesn't mean people understand you. Ironic, isn't it? Reminds me of you and Sarah.
Best intentions be damned. I don't care if Sarah knows what I'm trying to do. I'll save her, even if she hates me for it.
Final one for character analysis that I'm doing here. It won't be the final for you, but it is the final for me because, once again, I find myself on the precipice of the corridor of flame, ready to burn my sanity away at the altar of what could and should have been. But this time I won't. I said it in 13, again in 13.2. Now it just is what it is. It is Sazh Catroy. I'll be honest, I wrote all day when I decided to do this character section. I did them all in one go and I decided where to place them afterwards, and this was the last. And by this point really, I've been writing about one disappointing character being wasted after another, and I was tired. And then the most painful of all turns up, and I just couldn't be bothered. Yes, Sazh was screwed over, and in such a way that I'm still annoyed. We get a mini arc with Sazh, at least, even if he's barely present for it. Dodge went into some crystal coma, not quite crystal Pepsi, but a crystal coma, and so we gather the pieces of his heart, and then is happy again. It's nothing groundbreaking, but the Wildlands and Sazh are a combo that's really, really nice, and it's one of the most enjoyable parts of the game. I'll say that. If you look at it in isolation, it's very, very nice, and I'm trying to look for the positives. I know that my 13 video was very positive, my 13.2 video was mixed, and this one is quite negative at times with elements of positivity. It's like we've done almost a perfect circle, but the main thing is that even a couple minutes with Sazh is better than nothing. In fact, it's better than spending multiple tens of hours with most other characters in any game. I personally think that Sazh is one of the best characters ever written in a Final Fantasy game. He is absolutely one of the best. He's absolutely my favourite in the trilogy, if not the best in a JRPG ever. And that's not me exaggerating, I've talked at length about why that is. So, as good as that is, you've got the other side of the coin. So that's ironic considering his DLC in 13.2 being about gambling, but it's the lack of him not only in this trilogy but also in side material and spin-offs just saddens me. But I get it, I do. Demographics. He's not a spring chicken. I know, alright, but I'll always point to him as an example of a great character, one that deserved much better, sure, but one who's still awesome, even in spite of how badly he was squandered. I don't know how much his age had to do with it, but I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be. I know what Japan likes, they like the younger protagonist, I know this. You look at the popularity polls for any JRPG, it's just a self-insert boring fucking Kirito whatever guy. Whatever. Sazh moves on to the new world with his boy and his friends, and it's a nice ending, if nothing else. Despite all the crap he's gone through, I love that he gets this ending, I really, really do. And that's a positive. In a mug and negative, it's like the hay and a noodle stack. He's one of my favourite Final Fantasy characters of all time. He might be the favourite, right up with Aranea and Auron, Barret, Balthier, Ignis, a few others I'm probably forgetting. So even though it didn't end as great as it should have, the trilogy benefited due to his existence in a massive way. I still remember how insanely fun and likeable and relatable he was in 13. He lit up 13 too when he was there. Unfortunately, that wasn't very often, but what an incredibly likeable character, and what a brilliantly written character in the first game. This is how I'll try to remember him. Best boy Sazh. Why'd you waste him though? No. Gotta end on a positive, man. But it's good. But he had it. Ah, fuck it. Why do I even bother? I'm trying to. It is what it is. Leave it. While you do start out with 7 days, it can be increased to 13 by simply progressing through the main story and perhaps completing enough side quests. But there actually is a 14th day, an extra day, and the requirements for unlocking it are, I don't know. Here's the thing, I unlocked it in my first 2 playthroughs, first 2 times, but this time it didn't trigger, which is really odd, actually. You'll find information, or should I say misinformation, about the requirements everywhere you look. So my best advice is to just complete as many side quests as you possibly can alongside the main quest. It said I had enough, more than enough, and yeah, I didn't. Not bothered, honestly. The optional dungeon gives you a chance to fight the Omega versions of the monsters and time stops flowing, but it's not pertinent to the essay. But it made for good filler. Hope comes to say goodbye because God doesn't need him anymore. He says he'll just disappear because Booney doesn't like loose ends. This is the most personality that Hope has shown in the entire game. It's weird that I liked Hope so much in 13 and was indifferent towards him in 13 too while still appreciating him. And now I'm looking at this shell of a character now. He says it wasn't the real him, but if you ask me, that's sort of a relative term at this point in the trilogy. Hope. They deign to hide this very critical information, but Hope's story is the darkest one in all of the 3 games. Last time we saw Hope, he was with Noel, bringing in the end of the world. For a while, he helped the survivors of the merge of Valhalla and Pulse. There's a picture of him and Snow and Noel, actually, all fist bumping like bros, you know, vowing to save the world. And you can access it in the data log. But man, this sucks now. The reason is, after 130 years, Hope began to hallucinate. It was some pink-haired phantom. He obviously thinks, it's lightning, I'm not going to die a virgin, yay! And then, he must really miss the girl by this point, because despite the game's lack of references to 13 and 13-2, Lightning mentored Hope and helped keep him alive for the vast majority of 13, and they were very, very close. They kinda saved the world together. Lightning Returns tends to forget this, so I figured I'd bring it up. They saved the world together. Twice. And so he becomes obsessed with it, this pink-haired phantom with this memory of her, and he develops what I can only call the terminal case of one-itis for Lightning. But it was just Booney, Velza, the most powerful god of the lot. He was playing tricks on him. The wanker woke up when everything went to shit. He lured Hope into the artificial cocoon he made in 13-2 because he wanted Hope to be a vessel for him. Now with Hope gone from the world, for everyone else the world turns to the weirdos in the Order of Salvation. Because Hope really was that influential. He was Mr. Academy, and that Academy is the sole reason that the world of FF13-2 on Pulse thrived as it did. At least in the true timeline that we spent the whole game attempting to make a reality. It's also why the Ark exists. That's on Hope too, but also Alyssa, whom, well, she might as well have not existed in many ways, but then, after those 130 years, Booney literally tortures Hope. He tortures him. Not torches, tortures. And he turns him back into a teenager. The reasoning, apparently, is to better embody the pure and innocent vessel he requires to see his new world to fruition. So Booney tortured him for 169 years in total. This is the most insane lore I have ever read. Hope was tortured for 169 years. After everything the kid went through and the growth he had, he's tortured for 169 years and turned back into a kid and barely does anything in the finale game. Fuck off. So in many ways, this isn't actually Hope. The real Hope was captured by Booney, tortured, and then shortened. Then his heart was badly damaged, and now he's nearly emotionless, just like Lightning. So there's some of him in there, but all his character progression and growth literally tortured out of him. What were they thinking? I know he was kind of boring in 13 too, but now he's uber boring, which is really crazy. Still, Hope's conclusion involves a nice chat with Lightning as he reveals what really happened with him, as we can see just now, and he gets to see the new world with her and the others. Silver linings, that's Hope S time. All the potential in the world in 13, and they realised it, and then he was nerfed a little in terms of interesting characteristics of 13 too, but still a major player. And now the terrible regression of almost every character in the series is, in Hope's case, made literal as they turn him back into his younger self in every way. The writers were so close to self-awareness. Later hope. Hopefully your mum and dad are in the new world and you can finally get, well, maybe Lightning will see you as a man, I don't know. I know you didn't like Alyssa, and I think I see why now. She wouldn't have been able to shut the fuck up about it if you did get with her. Good luck, Hope. I hope you get your happy ending. Back with the story. Mog is now our designated navigator through time and space. Vanille has the power to destroy the souls of the dead with the Soul Song, but conversely, she can also save them, and saving these souls trapped in the chaos from being doomed to roam it forever is our goal now as the saviour on this final day of the world. Well, that and making sure Vanille doesn't die too, because that would also suck. Thing is, God wants this ceremony to happen, so we have to defy him. The game's been building up to it, it's obviously where we've been going with it, it's nice to finally get there. He's obviously a douchebag, we're all pawns to him, all pawns to all of the gods. Lindsay, Pulse, Etro, Benevelza, they all suck. Alright, Etro was nice, she was the only nice one, but now we get to defy our fate, and defy the gods. Luxerion is a mess, the monsters are bleeding through the chaos and just wrecking everything in sight. Lumina tells us what we already knew, but it's worth mentioning just to mention the stakes, so I can see what the story did it. What's interesting is that the soul of a dead person being destroyed means everyone will forget them. And it's very similar to Final Fantasy Typo, but in that game, everyone who died was just forgotten, no matter what. The idea is that Booney wants us to not have uncertainty or ties to the past, and essentially be unnaturally pure in a distinctly unhuman way that takes the life out of life. Lightning mentions this later on, but in her own way. Lumina doesn't want to be left alone and actually shows emotion for the first time. And as for why, maybe this analysis will explain it. Lumina's the best little troll and a new character in the trilogy. Certainly the only new main character. She adds an element of chaos to a cast that's already been ran through the ringer over the 3 games. I welcome her introduction, and she has a bit of mystery too, at least before we find out her true nature, which, in case I didn't say it, is this. Lumina is the physical manifestation of Lightning's long-repressed vulnerabilities. With all the hearts and souls, it's actually one of the less far-fetched and abstract little pieces of the lore in the trilogy. Since Lumina is literally Lightning's repressed emotions given physical form, she's naturally chaotic and acts out as though she's a prisoner and the prison that she resides in. But another reason for that is that it was the chaos that she was born from. Chaos plus repressed emotions can make people happen. Science lied to us, basically. Another perk of being a part of Lightning, an extension that's very literal and not even an abstraction or a creative liberty anymore, is that she becomes a vessel for Sarah's heart, which is how the writers justify bringing Sarah back later, despite her dying at the end of the last game. Clever, not being sarcastic. So that also explains why her appearance takes on the form of a young Sarah or Lightning, or at least how one might imagine them to be. I like the concept of Lumina, and how she's not only a vessel in the story for Lightning's emotions, but also how she's a vessel in a narrative sense to show us that Lightning's personality is still out there somewhere. It's just in another person, who's also technically her. I'd say I give up, but I was playing a side quest yesterday in which Lumina was getting up to trouble, and then I thought, oh, so in a way that's Lightning. Her personality is just, she makes things more fun. She does, when she turns up and never appears truly hostile or malicious, but does occasionally throw monsters at Lightning just to liven things up. She'd do anything to cheer up her other self. What a nice girl. She's a fine addition to the cast. Good new character. I like her very much, and she livens up a very dark and dreary world by being funny and messing with us as we go about our days and nights. Her best moment though involves her most vulnerable and human, despite being a manifestation of the chaos when she begs Lightning not to leave her. Because I guess you could say it's actually a part of Lightning begging not to be left alone. A big part of Lightning's story is that she had to grow up real quick so she could be strong for her little sister Sarah, but while she was putting on a brave face, Lumina here represents the reality of what went on behind the surface. At least I think that's the general idea. So this analysis of Lumina is basically an analysis also of Lightning. The main Lightning analysis will come later though, when we can talk about it more there. She's part Lightning, part Sarah, part Chaos, all Lumina. It's a shame she only got the single game, but then again, with how this series treats its characters, had she appeared in 13 or 13-2, by this point she'd have already been thrown by the wayside and forgotten for 90% of the game, so I'll live with this one. For a living, breathing plot device, Lumina's very fun. No more time limits, it's just our one final mission now. Stop the ceremony. Noel helps us out, realizing we're betraying God, and he sides with us and mentions us saving Sarah. That's right, Noel mentioned Sarah. It actually happened, so I guess 13-2 was not a fever dream of mine. Thanks Noel, you're cool again. Now it is still a JRPG, meaning the final dungeon both exists and is fairly drawn out, with this one being split up into different sections, 4 of them to be precise. But they do something very special with this one. First you have the fact that it's so disparate in tone and aesthetics to the other 2 final dungeons in the trilogy, with both of them being red and white and carrying with them a sense of vibrancy, but here it's also bleak and just black and white and monochrome, and honestly it's perfect. You also have people helping you out, like Noel in the cutscene, and later Fang in gameplay during a difficult boss, but only for a little while. Another will come up in a bit. In the main room, Vanille's preparing her voice for the soul song, but we ain't having that, so we beat up some order people. Pure souls, right? Pure souls with hearts of light. That's what's needed. And those tainted dead idiots aren't part of God's plan, are they? That's the Order's goal. We eventually talk Vanille into not being stupid, or an idiot, or a stupid idiot, and she listens to the souls of the dead, and they have hope for the future. So she's going to guide the souls instead, meaning Vanille won't die, and neither will they. Ah, Vanille. The lack of a new outfit hits Vanille just as it did Fang and Sazh and Noel, but she gets a funny hat, so this one's fine, obviously. Vanille now has been alive for many hundreds of years more than even the oldest people in the world, yet she apparently is stupid enough to be manipulated into performing the soul song for the Order of Salvation in Luxerion, who don't even look in any way trustworthy. Have you seen their hair? Have you seen their mustaches? They're the arse bandits who operate the church, by the way, and they're the most obviously suspicious people in the game, next to like the children of Etro. And you'd think that, having been through so much, and with literally hundreds of years of experience to draw upon, she wouldn't be so easily swayed into the malevolence of others and coerced into such things. Nope. She became stupid, just like Noel, and conveniently dumb as a box of rocks because the plot wasn't written better. She's still nice to us, she's still Vanille, but she's also a downer now, and it's just hollow as hell. No other word for it, Vanille just feels hollow. She adds barely anything, and everything fun around her has been memory hold for the vast majority of the game. I feel like, despite this being a series in which characters being mismanaged is a rite of passage, she's still got the worst of it out of everyone, even worse than Sazh, because at least he kept his personality and maintained his charm. Speaking of which, Sazh and Vanille, nothing. No interaction in the whole game. And that can be applied to most. Well, I guess they all sort of acknowledge each other in a way at the end, right? But in tangible ways, I guess is what I mean. Everything they built in 13 is just gone with Vanille and Sazh. They could have easily tied together Sazh and Vanille's quest, just as they could have done so with any other two characters in the game. And I understand that everyone is trapped in their own way, these characters, that's the idea I think. But 13 and 13-2 were about banding together and helping each other out, whereas every single one of them in Lightning Returns just waits around for hundreds of years, alone, until Lightning returns to bail them out and save their souls or whatever. Maybe they hung out, maybe it's implied, I don't know, but Vanille is the prime example of how badly this turned out. Yeah, that's all I got, any more and I'll set my heart off. I'll just say that remembering Sazh and Vanille in the Sunleth Waterscape and Nautilus, and knowing that the writers obviously made shit up as they went along post 13, makes it hurt a little. But also gives me the opportunity to just selectively pretend that 13-2 and Lightning Returns doesn't exist at times. It's perfect. Because the more I think about it, ending at 13 would have been perfect. It was a great ending, had closure, but left enough open to interpretation that you could have been forgiven for assuming that the gang would find a way to eventually rescue Vanille and Fang. Sequels aren't always a good thing, in fact I'd say they're 50-50 in exactly this regard, whether they'll be good or absolutely wreck everything good that the original game built up. So yeah, poor Vanille. At least she got closure though, and saw the birth in the new world, reunited with Fang. She's been through enough to deserve it, considering her and Fang saved the old world, Cocoon. It is nice that they get to be in the big scene at the end, but oh man did they ruin Vanille. And we're finally kinda together as a group, but not fully. Bruh. Seeing these guys together again, really cool. But unfortunately Sazh ain't here, and he bloody well should be. Once again the writers have completely forgotten him I think. Maybe they didn't, but it just seems that way sometimes. This would be really cool if I hadn't explained it earlier. Oh well, good stuff. Kinda similar to Kingdom Hearts though. A sentient being born of hearts and soul stuff. Does this mean she's the Lightning's nobody? Or Sarah's nobody? No matter. Puppet Hope is here to steal our friends from us. It's Booney in Hope's form and now to save them. A final dungeon for real. 4 separate throwbacks to the trilogy. Beautiful stuff. Although I wish they'd stuck Academia in there instead of Eden. Wait, is that Eden or the Palamecia? Whatever, neither of them are iconic like Academia. Why do I care? This dungeon isn't easy, nor is it mandatory though, but it's a good indicator for whether or not you're at the required level to beat Boonvelsa, because the final boss is just past that door right there. So it's worth doing at least one of the 4 mini dungeons just to figure that much out.
He had a dream of eternity. It was always his desire that this world would last forever.
Booney actually wants Lightning to become the new goddess of death. The goddess of death in the new world, basically. Lightning just wants to beat Boonvelsa up though, so final boss time. Light's literally squaring up to a god. I talked about her not being relatable in 13.2, but now she is, and she's starting on the big man. She's cool and relatable now. Isn't that cool? Full circle. Booney is the hardest fight in the trilogy for me. I did him earlier on today. Could have worded that better. He took me 4 hours. Could have worded that even better. Jesus. In phase 1, he immediately cast Doom, and if you can't keep yourself from dying to it, you're probably not going to win. You need to go back and change some things. I learned a lot of things due to this, but mainly just how under-equipped I was. I've been coasting along until then with whatever looked and felt the most fun, but this is where I had to upgrade and synthesize to the most powerful moves and the weapons and the shields. Everything I had, I just threw it in there. I also bought the best recovery items. Instead of the high potions I've been barely touching until that point, it was just X potions only. My second go involved being a little less stubborn by attending to all of these issues, but I still refused to let go of my favourite outfits, so it wasn't as effective as it could have been. In round 3, I went with some new garbs on top of my upgrades, but kept the white mage outfit. I like the white mage outfit. I wanted it to complete the game with I'm stubborn, alright? It's the coolest one. I will suffer to look good in my games. In phase 2, Boonvelsa plays with the elements, so it's best to have a variety of high-powered magic across at least 3 of the elements, so you can always have at least 2 on a rotation. Since if you're not doing massive damage, you might as well just throw your controller now. Phase 3 introduces Hypernova, which is one of those, this isn't a turn-based game, but it's still going to act like a turn-based game when the game wants to be cheap and throw an unavoidable move at you. I hate it, it's cheap as hell. There are ways to break the rules of your own game's causality, and this is not it. It's cheap as shit. You want it to be about skill, and it's like, okay, well, here's something that doesn't rely on skill and you can't avoid. It sucks. He also has much stronger attacks and quicker attacks in phase 3, meaning even if you don't time it perfectly, blocking is essential. There are some moves that will take out thousands of HP. And phase 4 is the stagger check, meaning he's immune to just about everything and barely takes any damage, so you have to stagger him, and quickly, since he has some powerful attacks again. For staggering, it took a while to get it right, but I really like Aurora, so I used it with Thundara, because they cost less to use and they stagger quicker, so you can cycle between them and keep it going for longer. But make sure to space them out over different schema, so you can interchange between them and have more ATB. At a certain point, it's a case of knowing you can do the first 3 stages pretty easily while barely using any items, but knowing it will take a little while, since you have to wait for phase 4, which is probably about 12 minutes into the fight for me, just to see if you got enough stagger power to actually do them in for good. After doing this battle for over 4 hours, albeit on and off, as I wrote down the notes for the battle, I could see the after image of the stagger bar. Does that ever happen to you? You see shit like that? 16 minutes, 3 stars, I'll take it. The final boss of the trilogy is done. Lightning defeats Booney, and he's so angry that he threatens to cast her into the chaos, and Lightning says, sure mate, I'll take Hetero's place. Well, maybe not in those exact words. She wants to protect the cycle of life. At this point, Lightning is literally the most powerful being in the world, but luckily she's nice and sets Hope free in her supposedly final act. It's the real Hope this time, Lightning sacrificing any hope of a normal life to protect all of humanity. At least that's her plan. So this Sarah is just a fake made by God, and because that's what's in this season, I guess, with this game. So many fakes, it's hard to keep track. Honestly, at this point, with fake Sarah and Lumina appearing like this, I would not blame you for being a bit lost. I was the first time round, but the main strength of this trilogy is in its characters. So when Lightning reaches out for her and Lumina hugs her, which is essentially Lightning's own sense of self coming back to her in a way that I think symbolizes her accepting that part of herself, that part of her heart that she locked away. Hope reaches out to help her back up, and that much is easy enough to grasp. Lightning needed help, reached out. Friendship stuff. Did I say friendship or French stick? Kinda got them mixed up. He was fine. Deep in some spacey pocket dimension of anime JRPG stuff, Boonvelsa still ain't quite dead, so we got a full-on Hollywood CGI cutscene with Lightning and Hope summoning their Eidolons to finish him off. And then Mr. Hero shows up, as does Noel, and Vanille, and Fang. And at first I was thinking, even now you're forgetting Sazh? But thankfully, we all anime beam Bunivelza, and Sazh turns up with Dash. Turns out they were looking for Sarah and Morg. Even Chocobo Chick is here. We're all here.
You're here.
But since Sarah's back, a quick little bit on her, since I'm doing a character analysis for everyone important. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed to have to balance this Lightning and Sarah seesaw that the 13 trilogy has going on again. But here I am, trying to play with the scales once more. Just can't have them both at once, can we? Sarah and Lightning. Can't have a game with Lightning and Sarah where at least one of them isn't either dead or half dead, or fighting in Valhalla on a time loop for time immemorial, or just chilling. There's a crystal Pepsi in the xiii fridge. Lightning tries to save Sarah, Sarah tries to save Lightning, and now it's right back to its origin point with Lightning devoid of Sarah, at least outside of the abstracts and the heart and soul stuff. So in that vein, there really isn't much to say about Sarah at all in this game, and it's more a character analysis of her throughout the trilogy. I guess they all are in a way, but she barely does anything in this game. It's unfortunate. The character that 13.2 built is now a cardboard cutout who doesn't appear till the end. We see fake apparitions of her that are about as real as your average Instagram selfie, and then she turns up at the end and has barely any dialogue, and absolutely zero dialogue with Noel. And I do genuinely believe that the writers just straight up forgot about Noel and Sarah as a thing, and that they dedicated an entire game to the two of them trying to save the world and the timeline together. Like, you play that game and you think, oh, they're bonded for life. And then this. I do find things to like about this game all over the place, but this, devoid of that even, Sarah provided nothing much of worth to the game barring some platitudes during the reunion, I guess at the climax that we just got past, and they've done it again. They've wasted Sarah like they wasted Sazh, like they wasted Fang and Snow and Vanille and Hope, and in a way, Lightning in 13.2. With regards to characters though, the 13 trilogy is one of wasted potential in general. Outside of the first game, I mean, and I hate saying that out loud, but just as it gave us some wonderful characters, I've got to be unbiased, I've got to say where things went wrong. It just didn't know what to do with most of them, most of the time. It's vintage Square Enix. I've come to accept that, and only really mention it now since I've realised, I guess, just how much I still like these guys. At least we got closure here. Even if it was done right at the very last minute, that they possibly could have pulled it off, closure is closure. Destiny is destiny. When you're used to 1%, 10% seems like Christmas, I guess is the thing. It feels like a legit sin to waste such likeable and compelling characters, so my ire isn't in any way directed at those characters. They're not real, after all, but rather the writing team. It's admirable though. Weirdly, it is admirable that Sarah encompasses something important as she reappears near the end, and that's that I still like her, and that I missed her very much, and I can still be very happy that she returned, much like the rest. About Sarah as a whole though, I've seen her called boring, and I said myself that she's alright and good enough, much like Noel, and even 13.2 as a whole. But she also had really good moments in 13.2. Moments of bravery, leadership, and mostly the funny moments. Sarah shouting at the flan to stop eating the cocoon pillow was peak 13. That's 21st century Kino. She's earned her place as a major player in the trilogy, and that's why it upsets me to no end to see her thrown aside by subpar writing that doesn't know what it's doing half the time, and certainly doesn't know what to do with her. It's a hazard of game development. I know it's different with games. You have to balance creating both a functional game from a gameplay perspective and also writing compelling characters while utilizing them in a way that does justice to them. But they are paid to do this, the game devs, and make obscene money sometimes as well. So, I mean, besides, they do it for one of the biggest companies in gaming also, so to expect a level of competency is not out of the ordinary or overly demanding. I don't think this is me being a nitpicky. I can be a nitpicky, but not right now. But still, I said something annoyingly similar when referring to the other guys, I guess, in 13.2, and the plethora of things you could have done with each of them really hits home when you realise just how large the chasm of unexplored ideas truly is. One day, I'll write about a Final Fantasy game that doesn't come with a chasm of unexplored ideas and wasted opportunities, but today is not the day. Off the top of my head, I mean, Sarah could have been saved halfway through the game, for instance, as an alternative, been used to replace a different story beat, or perhaps used to enhance one, like the one with Noel, or perhaps the one with Caius and Yeul, since she is heavily involved in both scenarios, or at least was, initially. And then you maybe could have just given us Sarah as a dual protagonist, alongside Grumpy. I know the emphasis was on Lightning for this one, but 13.2 spun its wheels for the express purpose of building Sarah into a decent protagonist that, while not on the level of Lightning for me, was still very fun to play as during gameplay and to root for during the story. She was really likable, always was. This was the perfect chance to finally reunite them both in a narrative, story sense, and also a gameplay aspect, perhaps even switching between the two. I said it earlier, I know, but once again, the reason the 13 trilogy drops the ball too often is that they try to juggle too many of them at once, and now Sarah has become the dropped ball. The interactions and the dynamics between Sarah and Lightning as dual protagonists could have been a perfect payoff for already having invested in both of them and played as both of them during the series, and Lightning, Sarah, then both would have been a good, I guess, paradigm to use. I keep getting the urge to say that the writers just weren't very good from 13.2 onwards and probably just lucked into a good gig and coasted off of the work that 13 put in, endeavouring to then write themselves into every corner imaginable and then try to write themselves out. And I think the theory has weight, but I can't commit to it fully because they did have some really good moments in both games still. But from a character perspective, I think that is the case. Hell, no matter how many people want to deny the objective truths of what 13 put genuine time and effort into, with the age-old criticisms that, just don't even faze me anymore. I don't want to sound mean, but the thought is present in my mind and it ain't going away that the character writing, the moment 13 ended, just died in a way. And that this is the game's way, or the trilogy's way, I suppose, of trying to pick up those pieces. That said, I like Sarah, but she does nothing here. It sucks, but she doesn't suck. She just wasn't given an actual chance to be a real character this time. She was a plot device, and then a main character, and now she's gone back to being a plot device, so she feels hollow as a result. I like her though. Thing is, even with Booney gone, the dead of the unseen realm need a god, and since Lightning ain't going to be that Etro replacement no more, Caius volunteers. He's got the hair for it. Noel wants his own personal Yeul back, and Caius, after strangling Noel a little bit since they are old friends, gives Noel the last Yeul of them all and releases her from her fate. All of the Yeuls. This isn't, I didn't write this down, but on the subtitles, it just says Yeuls, as in all of the Yeuls. They've been released. If there's any consolation, maybe Caius hangs out with Mog in the Unseen Realm, and they become buddies. It's a genuinely lovely scene, a genuinely lovely ending. How we got here is weird and convoluted, and annoying at times, but at least we did get here. These guys should have had better moments together like this throughout the game, but as always, something is definitely better than nothing, except when it isn't. It is today. Unfortunately, we have to leave Mog and all the Eidolons behind. Saying goodbye to Mog is actually painful, but don't tell anyone I told you that.
Is it over? Is God really dead?
Crystal Age is just a legend from before the world was born. And it ended before you were born.
If I told you Lightning saved Cocoon, saved her sister, killed God and entered into a brand new world so she could become a fashion model, it'd be kind of true. Now, I saved her for last because she's the star of the show, and now that our girl has ascended completely and wholly into magical girl Lightning, only to ultimately return to a much more down-to-earth person as we end the whole thing, it's a perfect jumping on point for the final analysis of her as a character. Certainly, one advantage of us being Lightning Farron again in Lightning Returns, other than the marketability, of course, is that on account of her having slept the past 500 years or so in an inertiatic crystal Pepsi stasis, she's as new to this weird world as we are upon booting up the game and becoming familiar with it, so there's a connection there again. And that connection is mainly lost with the other characters, if I'm honest, of whom you have no discernible idea what they've actually been up to for the past half a millennia. There's also a connection that was absent in the last game, and one that acts as a conduit between player and character that I always search for in any game that I play. After my little complaint about her relatability and how it gave way from her relatability in 13 to an unerring unrelatability in 13.2, and how that hurt her as a main character in my eyes, we now, oddly enough, have a connecting point back to the woman we've been following for 3 games now. Never opposite, in each game she looks noticeably different and has a different personality on top, at least in terms of every game relative to one another, but I could forgive that if the personality shifts were indicative of character growth. But the reality is that it's just simply haphazard writing that the character of Lightning suffered for, as many others did too, and also the capricious whims of the character designer. Not that that's a big deal, because in that vein it's nice to have a semblance of connection with a character I've watched and controlled for over 100 hours, hundreds now, across 3 separate games, even if she wasn't always the main protagonist, because she's the main protagonist of the series, so much so that she always gets compared to Cloud. As for Lightning being like a reskin of Cloud, or a female Cloud, probably the stupidest thing I've heard in a while. I think it's superficial, the similarities, and when it gets down to it, they're actually quite different. Another story for another day, but She's the main face of the trilogy as a whole, that can't be disputed, so it makes sense that they've always had this focus on her. As for having so much of a focus on her in this game, I think that was one of the drawbacks of it, but I can see why they did it. We've been Lightning since the beginning of 13, and while it was easy to relate to her at first, she became more distant to the player as the series went along, and now we have her back. That's to say, we've watched her grow as a person, learn to trust people, go on an adventure with her, now get torn from that very world that she helped save with her friends, only to become a sort of replacement goddess with goddess-like powers, I suppose, saving people's souls. At which point, she fought a Steel Panther member in a crazy timeless world called Valhalla, got defeated due to bullshit, lost her sister for a second time, and now wakes up 500 years later to find that the world is eroding away and we're all 13 days from said world completely ending. And on top of that, all of that, she's had her heart and soul taken from her to make her a pure goddess. And now she's the savior of humanity who has to save the souls of the living and the dead and guide them to a new world made by literally God. Final fucking fantasy. So, in Lightning Returns, she returns so hard that as her, we turn against that God, beat the crap out of him, and enter into the new world ourselves with the friends we made along the way. Kinda cool, but also an absolute mess. You know what I mean? That's the idea. It's cool, but it's a mess. That said, as a JRPG, that doesn't make it much of an idiosyncrasy, does it? But Lightning and her companions now have literally borne witness to the creation of a new world, and they enter it too, in a way that nobody else does, not as souls passing through, but rather knowingly making the plunge while completely cognizant of it. And that's Lightning's story. Video games are weird, man. Saving grace for me is that within this new world, there doesn't seem to be any crazy fantasy stuff, and there is a book in real life that released after the game did, because of course there is, right? And it chronicles what the cast got up to immediately after entering into the new world. The annoying thing is that they haven't all found one another yet, not even in this story, but the implication is obviously that they will eventually. Either way, our girl Lightning, who went for absolute hell, has finally got a chill ending in this nice little piece of countryside in the new world that might be implied to be Final Fantasy XIII's own take on our own real world, and might also not. Maybe it is Earth, I don't know. She's less a victim of fate in lore terms, but more a victim of the devastatingly directionless writing of the post-13 story. But the train of insanity ultimately delivered her to the station so that she could admire the green fields, just as we do while the game closes out. But why do we get the pensive, brutish Lightning who only lets her true feelings show rarely, especially after all the growth in 13? Well, narratively speaking, we can actually set aside that weird little space that the writers put her in during 13.2, wherein she was a little hot, little cold, little who knows really, and in true 13 trilogy fashion, come to an understanding via the wiki that the game's poor localization prohibited us from attaining through the simple, obviously outdated method of playing the game. Picking up a running theme in these essays, man. Well, to be succinct, her personality in this game has a far better explanation than the second, but in an ironic twist of fate that's almost fitting, since it's one that also harkens back to FF13. That explanation, while satisfying, is not explained particularly well. Simply put, when Lightning became Crystal Pepsi at the end of 13.2, she took Sarah's heart and soul with her. You know, magical anime Square Enix heart stuff. Well, she kept that heart, Sarah's heart, nice and warm for the intervening 500 or so years that she sat on that throne as Crystal Pepsi. How exactly Sarah's heart got into Lightning is one of those things that I've learned to psychologically step over quite naturally now, because there are things worth getting metaphysical over, and this ain't it. And so I really don't care, because this is a world of crystals and gods and magic, and it's inconsequential as a result of that. But upon Lightning's reawakening from that 500-year stasis, when Bunavelza decided she was prime goddess material to replace Etra, he purged Sarah's heart and soul from Lightning. I imagine it was just a Bunavelza thing. Human emotions are inconveniences to him, as revealed in the game itself, actually. He doesn't understand them, and has no intention of developing such an understanding. In that sense, he's quite one-dimensional, actually. So I suppose he probably just thought, I want my new magical girl Lightning goddess to be pure and untainted by all these emotion thingies. So let's remove the Sarah software from her heart and soul directory. Nice. All done. Oops, damaged her heart. Lightning's heart is now damaged and she appears emotionless at times. But you can also see her emotions in bits here and there throughout the game, especially if you play the side quests, which, well, I would recommend it. In my 13.2 piece, I quoted the wiki as saying that the soul is the essence of humanity, and that the heart and soul are both related to the ontology of human beings, with the soul being, I guess, contravened from the heart, but eventually made symbiotic to it, with the soul centering around humanity as one distinct entity, and the heart being the singular little counterweight to it. Alright, it's worth a little meta-analysis, but that's it. So essentially, Lightning's people essence has been damaged by Boonavelza, and this is the root cause of her personality being all subdued in Lightning Returns, despite her growth in the first game. But then again, it could also be said that that's less the cause and more the excuse. Because the writers obviously had a reason for wanting her to be like this. I just can't work out what it was. Maybe it's just the tone they were going for with the dying world, you know? A happy-go-lucky Lightning might not have fit into... well, it wouldn't have, would it? Maybe that's it. But I'll give this game its due. Little bits of emotion here and there in the game. They stand out all the more because of this. That much is nice to see in her interactions with just about every cast member in the game, but it's also a downer in that we've already watched her go from pensive and moody and brutish to nice and warm, and then with all the weird and anime stuff in 13.2 it got kind of jumbled up. So I suppose this Lightning has been set back in somewhat of a similar manner to the way that Snow was in 13.2 or the way that Noel was in this game. But this one actually has some rhyme and reason to it, whereas Snow and Noel just seem to have been mismanaged terribly. I will say this though, Lightning's personality does slowly come back to her as the game goes on. She starts by showing a bit, but she shows more and more and more the more you engage with the side quests, and I do wonder how much of that was intentional. And the moments in which that happens become special due to how rare they are, as I mentioned, so I guess that's something. Lightning by the end does seem really content, maybe even happy, or at least as close to it as we see in, I think, the entire trilogy, other than the end of 13. Which promptly got written out, so I don't know if that counts anymore. It counts to me. The story of Lightning is a turbulent one, in narrative ways that heighten the experience and also logistical ways that were awful and almost certainly born out of a lack of direction in the overall plot structure. But even with the second game included, I'm happy with the overall beginning and end point of our magical girl Lightning. Grumpy finally gets a happy ending, or more specifically a happy ending that didn't get rewritten and drag her down into some ghostly underworld like Valhalla as a reward for everything she did. I really do like Lightning as a character, and I'm genuinely sad to close the chapter on her, but all things must end, or everything that makes them special is lost. I mentioned in the Lumina section, since Lumina is basically Lightning when you disentangle all the anime wankery, that Lightning deep down is someone who had to grow up real quick to be strong for Sarah. I think now that Sarah can stand on her own, Lightning's one true mission in this trilogy is done, and that in itself is a form of closure as well. So of all the things that this game tried and failed to get back on track, only to make worse, this is one of the ones they got absolutely right, I think. In a weird way that I didn't appreciate as much at first, but later came to. Sort of like side quests, or in a weird way, the time mechanic. Liking something and appreciating it are two different things, but with Lightning, it's both. I'll miss Lightning, and I'll forever wonder if I didn't dive deep enough into her character, but whether or not she warranted 3 games, 2 of which she was the protagonist for, is debatable. And either way, I enjoyed watching her learn to trust people and accept her own grumpy insecurities, even if it did take 3 whole games to do it. But in defense of her writing, I guess, she was always invariably moved forward as a character by a desire to help the people that she cares about. From the start of 13, her goal was to save Sarah. In 13.2, it was to save her new friends and also Sarah. And in 13.3, I guess we can call it, she was out to save everyone, but with Sarah at the forefront of her mind, even with part of her personality literally missing for narrative reasons. I mentioned already that I do possess many a misgiving for a lot of the things in the 13 trilogy, but still, part of why I forgive and accept it, as it is, I guess, lies in the fact that it did go to great lengths to attempt to patch up the loose ends. It tried, at the very least, to provide some genuine closure, and with this last scene of her stepping out of the train, I've got to admit, it's an emotional thing to let go of a character you've been rooting for 3 games. Sort of autistic, that's okay. It's a JRPG, we're JRPG fans, we're in our element. She is off to the realm of our headcanons and TV commercials and spin-off games. Although there's just as much a case to be made that she and the others really did enter our world. You want to know why? This is why. That's right, Lightoning is one of us now, doing adverts for fashion stuff. Yeah, I never cared about fashion. Why exactly you need some upper middle class wanker telling you what is in this season and what to wear is beyond me. So yeah, Lightning has joined the fashion police. Very vapid, very disappointed in her. But without her magical sea powers, or her new saver powers, she can't kill monsters for cash anymore. So she's doing the wise thing and using her looks to make ends meet. And it's nothing untoward either, she's still our pure maiden. Unless you look online. Weird shit aside, though that commercial is 100% real and possibly even canon, I really enjoyed Lightning as a protagonist. Brilliant protagonist, when she was brilliant. Even if I believe her best showing was 13 and that Lightning Returns was never going to do her complete justice, on the whole, she's among my favourites, ever. Even when she was crazy unrelatable, she still maintained that level of, alright, some degree of relatability. and also believably in spite of that, and because of that, I stubbornly say goodbye to her and wish her well in her modelling career. I just hope that the vanity doesn't go to her head, and that she can deal with all of the simps that she will no doubt attract. Then again, she was the saviour goddess. If that wasn't enough to make her become a conceited asshole, little modelling should be fine. See you, Claire. Claire, I'll miss you. All the best. I said it before with regard to Final Fantasy XIII, and I'll say it again, but for the whole trilogy, you will never hate it as much as I love it. I am not a 13 apologist, because I ain't fucking sorry. I love this trilogy, stupid and annoying crap included. So that is the 13 trilogy. Most FF games don't get anywhere near this much content, and none have since. 15 got quite a bit of DLC, but certainly didn't get free games. And it's absolutely the case that I think it peaks with the first entry, 13 I mean. And I do still hold to the idea that the sequels weren't necessary, and the only reason they did it was the money. In general, I am still glad that they do exist. I'm glad these games exist, all three of them. Gives me something to write about, give us 2 more wonderful soundtracks, a lot of memories, new worlds, locations, characters, funny moments, emotional moments, and pretty much everything in between. Annoying stuff, like I said, included. And through incredible highs, peaceful times, turbulent moments, all the way down to the absolute train wreck in character writing at certain points, and the potentially make it up as you go along ethos that occasionally bled into the series, like the chaos of Valhalla. Lightning Returns, at least beyond the most amplified elements of chaos and liveliness, ends on an initially somber but ultimately peaceful note that brings with it a sense of closure that, while far from perfect, is far better than nothing, and a fulfilling experience even in spite of all of that nonsense, which I imagine is why we love it so much, those of us who do. I was looking for reasons to love this game before I started playing it, before I started writing the essay, and just as I did in 13.2, I found a bunch of reasons to love it. So I don't want anyone to think that because I went into detail about the bad parts I don't still love this series, because the 13 trilogy is, to me, one of the most wonderful things to ever come out of gaming. I love it to bits, even in spite of all of the silliness. Probably much more because of these things, actually. But I won't ever sit here and pretend that I think the director and writers ever had an overarching plan for the entire trilogy, from start to finish, or that anything post-13 was anything outside of a haphazard and rushed mess that maybe had a vague outline at best. Could be wrong, but that's the impression I got, and still get, and that's based on over a year of analysis on and off. I won't pretend that it's in any way likely that they even planned on making a sequel to the first one to begin with. I think that the 13 trilogy is 3 distant relatives forced to try and get along, and the weird thing is, despite their plethora and differences, they actually kind of do. And I think it's their unique elements that stand out the most and add to the experience, in exactly the same way that that very lack of unifying direction also subtracts from it as well. Got to take the good with the bad, I suppose, just like life in general. I'm not happy with how little the previous games are referenced, and that's no doubt another of the many manifestations of the fact that this entire thing really genuinely was very likely meant to be one game. The insanely large size of the monster that is the missed opportunities of this trilogy is now large enough to destroy an entire city and have a movie made about it. Many characters were overlooked and some straight up ignored, and it hurt, as expected, to write about, but to play it again also. As always with 13, still love it. The little instances we did get of these things that I didn't think there were much of, or enough of, with the characters and the music, we get enough of to provide me with a sense of closure that I can now appreciate much, much more. So I forgive it. I forgive you, Lightning Returns, and 13.2 as well. You are a mess, but so am I. You're a beautiful mess, and I can't imagine 13 without the two of you idiots as well, even if you were contrived in a really weird and unavoidable way. I accept that Lightning Returns has so many weaknesses that it's a miracle it even made it out of the door, but it did find its way out, even if it was by stumbling and falling out of it like it just necked a bottle of vodka mixed with Ribena. Tries its best, has all the ambition to reach for the stars, bounces off the International Space Station, and lands back on Earth with a big fucking bang. I am perfectly comfortable saying these negative things about a game that lives in the same house as 13. The reason is simple. I don't believe that the main strength of Lightning Returns is in the core elements of the experience, such as the story, character arcs, narratives, because they were all mostly wasted, even if they did pull them back in right at the end and do some things really, really well. Though I believe the main pros of the Magical Girl Lightning game are identical to that of the series as a whole, in that they're hidden within the liminal spaces. The series has a great emphasis on time, but it's its use of space that reached me in the end, because within that space, they made things beautiful and allowed them to breathe. They never had an issue with taking their time, even when they put in a bloody time mechanic, and sometimes that was terrible, but it was also beautiful sometimes as well. They took every dimension of gaming and made it as pretty as possible, so even if people hated it, sometimes justifiably so, they'd probably still have something nice to say about it, regardless of that. It's a risk taker, and the polarizing nature of this free game project reflects that even now, because we're still talking about it. It's in the music that pushes and pulls you back and forward. It's in this beautiful dying world on its last legs that's hilariously analogous to the game's own development, now that I think about it. It's in those little moments of charm that occasionally breach the game's more somber tones, and it's in the ending that finally remembered it's still a part of the trilogy of games, and has to wrap up the damn thing already. It's in the trilogy as a whole, and it's in my fucking soul. I'll replay it if I ever reach 70 years old or something. So, this is as much a look at the 13 trilogy as a whole as it is one game with this essay, and the funny thing is, it's its place within the context of that trilogy that ultimately saves it in the end, despite its hesitance to honour that past at times. Maybe the writers genuinely forgot that particular past at certain points and got hung up on possible pasts. Well, of course they did. Regardless of this, remnants of that past left a lasting enough impression for me to appreciate those little spaces that I mentioned earlier just a little more and explore them with a sense of excitement and discovery that rarely hits a jaded wanker like me anymore these days. Quite an accomplishment, Toriyama, Square Enix. I didn't think it was possible. And now that multiple worlds have been explored, from Cocoon, which should have been explored far more, and Pulse was so explorable that it had multiple versions of different locations from different timelines, and now Nova Chrysalia is what remained of all of these worlds in its withered state, and yet manages to condense the soul of all of these places while still carving out its own identity, and overall just manages to cram the soul of the entire trilogy in one game, even if it is afraid to show it sometimes. Even though a mysterious fourth world is where we find ourselves at the end, as the camera pans out at those green fields, and you're left wondering where exactly you are, and assuming it actually is meant to be Earth as we know it. Even with these questions, perfect bit of closure. It's hard to let go, but it's easier when you get that final scene. I like that it isn't stated. I like some air of mystery to outlive a story's conclusion, because it lives on in our heads. What matters to me now is that the characters did get that happy ending. They did fight their fate. They changed their direction. No, I'm not saying destiny, and they've essentially done what they've been trying to do for the entire trilogy. It's an absolute mess of a sub-series, and it's the most beautiful mess I've ever seen, as is this game. Now that it's gone, there will never be anything like it ever again, and I don't give a fuck who knows it. Make fun of me, I don't care. You can't wipe the smile off my face when I think about it. I bet you hate that I'm smiling about it. And that includes all the positives and negatives in equal measure. You can't have one without the other. I love the 13 trilogy, not in spite of its shortcomings, but because of them. I'll always give Lightning Returns one thing. What started as a simple tale told in a convoluted way about two worlds in 13 became a convoluted tale told in too simple a way in 13-2, and now we have, finally, a simple tale told in a simple way. But now it is the end of the world, and the start of a new one. I don't want any remakes of these games. Remakes are almost never better than the originals, and Square Enix remakes aren't even remakes anyway. Remasters would be great, but weirdly enough, the fact that they're confined, these trilogy games, to dodgy PC ports and the PS3 console kind of keeps them special in their own way. They're surprisingly modern anachronisms, maybe a little gatekeeping, not too much, just a healthy amount is a good thing. So yeah, I'm well enough aware that this series is as divisive as any other Final Fantasy experience, but I'm gonna just say it, I'm glad Lightning Returns exist, I'm glad they all exist, I'm glad I bought them all, I'm glad I played them all. Even the absolute worst of these games is only seconds away, 2 degrees of separation from one of the best moments I've had in gaming ever. Always love this trilogy, always will. And the narcissistic cries of people who think that video game quality is an objective thing can sink into the void for all I care, because I'm too busy enjoying the series. It's special, man. And like anything really special, it's as beautiful and vibrant as it is monumentally weird and infuriating at times. 13 might be my favourite game of all time. I only wish my video on it was more in depth. Never gonna let go of it though. I love that it was my first essay after coming back. The entire trilogy carried this obsession with being beautiful, often to the detriment of other areas, but that means that even though it's a mess, it's a beautiful mess throughout. And if I ever make it in my 70s, against all reason, I will boot up these games one last time. Can't think of a better way to go out. It's bad sometimes, at least subjectively, for me, but it still has soul. Incredible trilogy. I fucking love the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy. Not fucking sorry.
This journey is over now. That soon we'll be together.